one's gunning for me tonight. I spent the last week running from the heat, but the beat's coming alive. Let's get lost tonight. Lord, who's on my right?
All right. Hello, wackos. Welcome to Without a Country. I am Corinne Fisher. And I had to close the YouTube screen because I was hearing an echo of myself. But anyway, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to Without a Country. I'm Corinne Fisher, 2025 mayoral candidate here in New York City, stand-up comedian, podcaster, host of Without a Country. Thank you so much. If you are new, if you are old, welcome to the show. We go over the biggest news stories from the perspective of the right and the left, and we find the truth in the middle here on this show. Everyone is welcome on this show. I myself am certainly a leftist, but absolutely everyone is welcome on this show. And I do feel like that is a little bit rare for leftist spaces. So I do want to give myself a personal pat on the back. Anyway, big news today, especially for a space camp girly like myself. About 16 minutes ago, the Artemis 2 launched to the moon. This has not happened in like 50 years. We're going to go over this, but that's very exciting. I kind of had updates, going on my screen as I was putting together the show for this afternoon. And I was a little bit worried because they had an issue with the battery. Then they had this other issue. And I was like, I was getting Krista McAuliffe vibes, honestly. And not to be heartless in any way, a disaster. But I was just getting a little bit worried about whether or not it would go off. And I feel like sometimes in situations like that, maybe they push to do something that they're actually not really ready to do because they had a small window now. And then if they weren't able to do it in this small window, they wouldn't have been able to launch again until April 30th. But they are up in the air. Hopefully everyone is safe and they get the information that they are looking for, which again, we'll go over in just a moment on this show. So that's pretty cool. Definitely something that, we haven't had the time or budget to really go to space recently. So it's cool that we're back into the NASA space program, and I was reading on the NASA website and everything. So a couple housekeeping things before we get started. Alfred's up here. Hello. Say hello to all your fans, Angel. Yeah, that's a good boy. Alfred right here. Alfred is representing all the adopted dogs and assorted other animals. They certainly have cats as well. And I don't know if they have hamsters, but you can, a lot of times rescue hamsters, guinea pigs, sometimes birds. But Alfred is from Pup Stars Rescue here in New York. A reminder to adopt, don't shop. And on Nacho Bitches reunion show hosted by Blair Saki and yours truly is happening next Thursday, a week from tomorrow, Thursday, April 9th at New York Comedy Club, Midtown, the East 24th Street location, the original home of Nacho Bitches. I am so excited to do this reunion show. Blair hasn't been in New York in a long time, and she hit me up and she was just like, hey, do you want to do a reunion show? This is a show I didn't even realize we started in 2014, this show, and we haven't done it in quite some time. Obviously, Blair's been living on the West Coast, which is, she's from the West Coast for a while now. And so it's going to be great. And we just finalized the lineup this afternoon. It is going to be, we wanted to make it very like the original people who would have appeared on the original show. And thankfully, a lot of them are hugely successful now. So this really works out for us. But hosted by Blair Saki and me, and it's going to be starring Rosebud Baker, Ian Fidance, and Lisa Traeger. 3 of my favorite comics to watch. So make sure to get your tickets. We're already selling those tickets pretty quickly. So if you are thinking of coming, I would say buy those sooner rather than later. And then on this Saturday, April 4th, I am working with Disrupt to bring you the Epstein Easter egg hunt. This is basically a push from Disrupt, which, as a reminder, is the left response to Turning Point. I've been working with the founder a lot. I'm sure if you look on my Instagram, you see a bunch of collabs between Carlos and myself, who is the founder of Disrupt. And it's an initiative to get people reinvested in making people here in America pay for the information that we saw in the Epstein files. There are so many Manhattan elites, both locations and individuals, who are mentioned in the Epstein files. And this is a way to, get people out as a community. It is an actual literal Easter egg hunt, but you will be searching for Easter eggs all over Manhattan, and they will be placed in places that are associated with the Epstein files. And in all the eggs, there will be information about names, places, locations, etc., from the Epstein files. And then additionally, there will be prizes in some of the eggs, like if you find the golden egg or something. So that is what I am up to in the next couple of weeks, where you can see me in person in New York City. And let's move on to the Wacko mailbag. We had a very full inbox. Remember, if you want to email me, it is withoutacountrypodcast@gmail.com. This first email is just the response that PETA sent me. Sorry, my dog's walking all over. It's just a response that PETA sent me. I don't know how they have the man and woman power to do this, but PETA's like Scientology. They're everywhere. They stalk me, and honestly, I respect it. But I did get a thank you from a press officer over at PETA for the Iditarod piece that I did last week. Hi, Corinne. I heard your segment on the Iditarod, and I just wanted to thank you for sharing this information with your listeners, many of whom may have not known how cruel the race really is. If you would ever like any additional information on this or any other animal-related topic, please don't hesitate to reach out. We would love to hear from you anytime. And so that's directly from PETA. But I also got a wacko email from someone whose dad used to do Iditarod racing, and that I wanted to share with you. Again, I've never been to the Iditarod. It was just some video footage that I saw I thought was particularly disturbing. And basically anything that is, kind of categorized under animal entertainment. And, I'm a girl who used to love going to the circus. I'm wary of. I also was recently, this week, I was invited to go to the rodeo. In New Jersey, they do a rodeo. I didn't know that. It's South Jersey, so kind of a completely different state than the New Jersey I'm from. But yeah, my friend invited me to go to the rodeo for her birthday. And I was like, I would love to celebrate your birthday, but I got to do a little bit more research on if I can go to a rodeo. Like, I don't know if anyone wants, a lot of these some of these animal things are just like are pretty foreign to me, because they're not things that I would, happen in suburban New Jersey. And since I did not grow up wealthy, I am a lot more well-traveled, now that I'm 40, than I was in my youth. So a lot of these kinds of things I've never gotten the opportunity to partake in, which is why I am not as informed on those things. But, we can't all be living every single life. This person who wrote in is also a virologist. So they also included some information that was recently, I guess, a study that recently came out about SARS-CoV-19. And this person does wish to remain anonymous, so that's why I'm speaking in such terms. So the person writes, I first wanted to share a recent study regarding origin of SARS-CoV-2 COVID-19 virus, which may or may not be within the scope of Without a Country. I looked into the supplemental information that this person sent, and it's just like it's for a science show. It's I was like, this is beyond my pay grade. I started looking through it. They're studies, and I'm used to reading studies, but more about things like feminism and stuff. So virology studies, it's gonna go above my head, and I don't want to convey information incorrectly. But I think the summary that this person writes is kind of enough information for what we need and the time that we need to take on this for this episode. But it says, furthermore, and then they go into the Iditarod. So there was recently a study published in a top tier scientific journal, and it's linked below. We can include the link in the show notes if anyone's interested, in which the authors examined the genetic signature of multiple viruses and demonstrated viruses from a lab have a different genetic signature than viruses originating for animal hosts. So broken down very easily in this writer's email. The authors showed that SARS-CoV-2 has the genetic signature of a virus that was circulating in an animal host, not from a lab, as the White House website would lead us to believe, as we went over on the show either last week or the week before. A notable control of the paper was that they were able to include a flu virus that was in a lab and then infected humans in a challenge study, and this virus had the lab-based genetic signature that SARS-CoV-2 did not. I am a virologist, and I even felt the paper was dense, but it explained decently. It was explained decently on the podcast this week in Virology, which I did start watching again. I was like, I got a lot of stuff to do for this week, but if this is something you are specifically interested in, I just kind of wanted to share it because I did not appreciate how the White House was presenting information as if it was fact that was not at all scientifically backed. And then this virologist's email is basically saying, like, not only is it not scientifically backed, there's actually recently been a study that goes against exactly what the White House website is saying. The person goes on to say, I know this likely exceeds the boundaries of the show, but perhaps could fall into the conspiracy theories bucket. I don't even think it's a conspiracy theory. To me, anytime, maybe like the lab leak is a conspiracy theory, but anytime we are getting scientific information to back something up, it's like, that's what I'm looking for, especially when it comes to COVID-19. I think there are a lot of individuals that think that the COVID-19 pandemic was the result of a lab leak, 100%, and wonder why. Again, it's on the White House website. And this is pretty solid evidence disputing that. And I mean, again, I don't know if we look into it again, but I mean, originally, it was, it was pretty widely talked about that it was, from the pangolin at the live animal food market. And then all of a sudden it went to lab leak. And it's like, I don't know. It's like, you can't even say, I don't even know. Cause like, I think at one point it was like considered like xenophobic to talk about the pangolin, but I'm just relaying what was happening since I was there, meaning not at the lab or by the pangolin, but I was, around during COVID-19, as I'm guessing were all of you. So all the links again are there, and we can include those in the show notes. I don't want to spend too much time on that right now because there's a lot of other stuff going on in the world. And then moving on to the Iditarod, just to provide caveats and background on. Are we still there, Mike? It just refreshed. I don't know what's going on. Just to provide caveats, background on my perspective. When I was very young, my dad competed in sled dog races, but he transitioned to giving rides to tourists to escape the competition. So he was definitely not as extreme as those competing in the Iditarod. Just checking online to make sure we are still live. Let's see. It's nice when you have to watch yourself on YouTube. Okay. From everything I've witnessed, yes.
It was in the chat. We're good.
Okay. From everything I've witnessed, sled dogs are born to run and love it. I don't know what this word's supposed to be. I watched the start of a dog sled race when all the dogs are hooked up to the sled and the sled is anchored until takeoff. Every dog will be lunging, jumping, barking, and clearly very much wanting to run, which I don't doubt. It's not that I ever doubted, that dogs wanted to run. It's that, maybe they're excited to run for the first several miles and then it's too much for them. Like that's all I'm saying. It's like, it's not that pretty much all dogs like to run, even like Chihuahuas like to run, it's just like when is too much. And often, as with, greyhound racing in Australia is something that I follow a lot. I'm a big Georgie Purcell fan. And, a lot of these animals are dying. It's not, of course, greyhounds love to run, but it's that they are being pushed to a capacity that is beyond it's going beyond what they wanted to do then, and then they can't advocate for themselves because they don't have the same voices that we've had. I've never seen any sort of whip or force of any kind used to force the dogs to run or run faster. If a musher falls off the sled, the dogs will continue running. If the sled tips over, the dogs will drag the musher as the person holds on for fear of being stranded on the trail. From my understanding of the Iditarod, every dog is evaluated by a vet in order to race and at every checkpoint throughout the race. And again, I am sure they are, but similar to how humans are evaluated for different things, like you can't convince me that you can't like pay off a veterinarian, because certainly doctors are being paid off. So again, I agree. And like, you were there. That's why I'm presenting this perspective. And I even like when I, obviously anything that I'm presenting from PETA, sorry, PETA, I know you're listening, but I'm also approaching with a grain of salt, because they tend to be the most extreme as far as animal wellness. And, sometimes I wonder if they think that my dog living with me is animal abuse, that it should be in some kind of a dog commune. So if a pregnant dog was allowed to run the race, this was somehow missed by a vet. If there are injuries, I think the dog would hide it like most animals and continue running until limping is noticed by the musher, and then the dog should be put in the sled. The bag on the sled is made for this, or the injury is noticed by a vet at the next checkpoint. Regarding the dog killed by a snowmobile, there must have been issues with local snowmobilers targeting mushers. The Iditarod is an approximate 1,000 miles of Alaskan wilderness. It's not possible to have all spots of the trail supervised. So if an intoxicated or ill-intentioned snowmobiler is targeting a team, it's difficult to prevent. There are not mushers on snowmobiles, so this point from PETA is really misunderstood. One thing my dad often highlighted was that these dogs are athletes. They are generally not house trained, and they often prefer to sleep outside rather than in, which, is known. Like, there's plenty of videos all over for anyone, who owns a husky specifically. They live for snow. And there's even cases of, animal groups being called when people leave their husky outside in the snow. And those are people who are uninformed about that particular breed, who's like, those animals like live for when it becomes snowy outside. And honestly, it's probably animal abuse to have a husky in a warm climate. When I see huskies even walking around in New York City in the summer, I'm like, that husky does not want to be here. The dog boxes that they are transported in should be filled with straw for warmth and should be adequately sized for the dogs to move around in like a dog crate. That was my number one thing. You can go to the PETA's Instagram. And again, I know PETA. I know they're going to find the absolute worst example of this. But the video that was shown, these were full-size dogs in crates that were big enough for like a 15-pound dog. And these were over 30-pound dogs. So that was my main issue with it. And they definitely were not being put in there carefully. I don't disagree with everything you mentioned, but I think the perspective you presented is largely through a lens in which you are comparing these racing dogs to Alfred. I know you didn't mean to. That sentence actually just pissed me off, though, because I'm like, do you think I'm dumb? Like, Alfred's a 15-pound like Chihuahua mix. Like, I'm not comparing Iditarod dogs to Alfred. Alfred's a tiny dictator. He's absolutely, but also I would argue, Alfred, you guys don't even know this about him, an extremely good hiker, can hike for hours through pretty rough terrain. Very talented boy. Even when I've fostered huskies that are not trained to run, they often can't be let out in a fenced yard because many can climb chain-linked fences. If you are prepping a dog for a race, putting on a harness, hooking up to the sled, you have to handle them somewhat aggressively because the dogs are so excited to run that they will drag you on your face to the trail. I agree that it would be nice to have a softer method, but there are no alternatives that come to mind. But again, it's like, okay, well, dogs are domesticated, right? So it seems almost then like, are these dogs that are running the Iditarod, are they some kind of like, closer to wolf breed, as in, dogs, came from wolves. Obviously, we all know this. But then once dogs are fully dogs, it's because they are domesticated. It is humans' responsibility to make sure that they are trained like for whatever they're doing. So like if they're so excited that they can't be controlled, to me, that would also be a problem, because that's not good for their nervous system. Again, I've never been to the Iditarod, believe me, and it was one of my life's goals to go sledding with dogs, although I think maybe no now. I've never witnessed the culling you referred to. If a dog is too slow for the team, they can be sold to a slower musher. My dad would purchase dogs from other mushers, as speed is not important if you are giving tourists rides. The last criticism I'd like to make is that you said it is likely all about money. I don't think this is the case. Well, because anything in America is. I don't think this is the case, given the Iditarod is easily the most famous dog sled race, of course, and first place prize is approximately $81,000, which is a lot of money. There are sponsorships, but the costs of entering the race, dog food and equipment, training in Alaska, etc., far exceeds earnings. I think rich mushers are few and far between. If you don't genuinely love the sport and dogs, I can't imagine you would put yourself through something like the Iditarod. My main point is that based on my experience, the individuals within the dog sledding community truly love the dogs and take care of the animals. I think it looks different than how the average dog owner cares for their dog, because there are so many of them, resources are relatively low, and the dogs are uniquely athletic. I think for sled dogs, a training run is likely more beneficial to their care dog's mental well-being than sleeping on a couch. I'm sure that there are bad apples within the community and likely race situations where things can be reevaluated. But from my experience, the dogs are generally prioritized. My dad's last dog died during the pandemic, and he told me he hasn't gotten another one because the losses are too hard for him. I've met a lot of mushers, and I think the majority care about their dogs just as much as my dad did. So again, don't want to spend too much time on this because I don't think it's the most pressing thing going on this week, even though I love dogs, as much as life itself. But I did want to present that because that's what the show is about, presenting different perspectives. And just in general, I think basically every time I present like an animal welfare story on here, I think I'm just like a lot. I'm like, how like a lot of people are just like way further left than me, like in some politics, as far as like going fully like anarchist. And I'm pretty far left, but not the furthest left. I think that's like I am more like anarchist when it comes to dogs, like really crazy about certain, animal rights. And so, a lot of things that I believe, someone who works with animals, in a certain way will always email in, when it comes to eating meat or something like that. Like, again, I still eat like poultry and stuff sometimes, but there's nothing that you can say to me that's going to convince me that it is like ethical to eat meat, even though I still sometimes consume meat. So at a certain point, there's just some things that we're going to have to agree to disagree on. But because this is such a specific animal topic, and someone had this specific experience, I did want to present that counterpoint. I thought that was good. So thank you so much for writing. And again, I know you want to stay anonymous, so thank you, anonymous. Moving on to our next Without a Country mailbag story. This is from Wacko Dia. It's hopefully I'm saying that right. This was really interesting. This is from the New Republic, and it came out like a little bit ago, but within the month. And I'm actually surprised that I missed this one, February 27th. So this says it can now be plainly said Trump is planning a November coup d'etat. During the campaign, it was kind of hard to picture the specifics of how Trump might pull off such a thing. Alas, it's getting less hypothetical by the week. And we know he's been messing a lot with voter stuff that's, been coming out every single week. This week he's, working on, making it only so that only some people can do mail-in voting when normally anyone can mail-in vote. And he's also, losing his mind. I actually watched the first half of Melania last night, finally, because it was available. It's available on streaming services now. I think it was on Amazon Prime. And I mean, I will just say briefly again, I was watching with my boyfriend, and he was just like, he woke up at 5 a.m. for some reason, and then like I had to go to sleep very early, so we just stopped watching it. But in the first half of the documentary, first of all, it seems like they're just sticking their middle finger at us with fuck you money, because, within the first like 45 minutes. They use Rolling Stones, Michael Jackson, Billie Jean, Tears for Fears, Everybody Wants to Rule the World. So right out of the gates, I'm like, they are just swinging their dick with money. These rights to these songs are going to cost tens of thousands of dollars each. And I'm like an hour into the movie, and basically all Melania has done, I will say, she seems like she's very kind and respectful to everyone she's worked with, but she's talking about how she's working so hard. And obviously, I know this is a documentary that covers the 20 days leading up to the Trump administration's second term, but all she's doing is making really precise alteration changes to her inauguration day outfit, which is like, lady, only you care about this. What are we doing here? And showing us the over-the-top ostentatious dinner that they are going to have, which includes a golden egg. And let me tell you, there is just something that bothered me so much about, while people in this country are suffering, the incoming president and all his lackeys sitting down to enjoy golden eggs. That just made my stomach turn. It is, and I would really like a breakdown of who is paying for all of this. And another thing that I learned, that I guess obviously it makes sense, but I didn't even consider it, is that when you're switching between presidents, well, first of all, they only have 5 hours to do this. But when you are switching between presidents, they switch out all the furniture, all the artwork, if you so choose. And now listen, there were logistical things, like basically like last time Barron Trump was in the White House, he was a little kid, so obviously his bed was smaller. They needed to get him a larger bed, an adult bed. That's fine. That makes sense. I don't mind that. But they were just like, a lot of this was just like aesthetic and taste. And I just think it is so crazy, again, when CEOs are being shot because the healthcare system in this country is so fucked, that our tax dollars are going towards switching art and furniture out in the White House. Like, it should be a standard, like a hotel. The furniture a Republican gets is the furniture a Democrat gets, is the furniture a socialist gets, is the furniture a woman gets, is the furniture, like, what are we talking about here? What an absolute crazy waste of time and money. And it's not just like the people who are physically doing this. There are teams of stylists. There are interior designers. Just like the first hour was absolutely all aesthetic based, whether it be personal aesthetics or the aesthetics of the White House. Just an absolute complete waste of money. And then my only other observations were, obviously Trump, I'm sure, knew he was being recorded, but I will say Donald Trump speaks to Melania the same exact way he speaks to us. So unfortunately, I think that's just the way he speaks. And then the second part is like Melania's favorite artist is Michael Jackson. And then she's married to Donald Trump. So I was like, I guess she just has a type, predators, allegedly. Yeah, so that's that. And let's go into this. So back in 2024, Kamala Harris and the Democrats struggled to convince voters that a second Donald Trump term would constitute a serious threat to democracy. We can debate the effectiveness of her and their rhetoric, but on a certain level, it was a hard argument to make because it was hypothetical. Voters aren't very interested in wrapping their heads around hypotheticals, or at least vague ones. And again, I mean, I think the way that she would have been able to do this more effectively is to really look into this Project 2025 and highlight some of these things specifically. Again, she didn't have the time, and it was just very disorganized. But I mean, again, they laid out exactly what they were going to do, and they did that. So even if she still lost the election, there would have been more specific examples that she presented to us as a candidate that would then have been like, she was right and she was specific. But instead, we were all talking about nonsense. And Harris's hypotheticals were mostly vague. So if she or any Democrat tried to say, for example, that there was a very real threat that once in office, Trump might try to cancel elections, most people kind of tuned that out. I was more than willing to believe that Trump might try to cancel elections or take over the media. But even I, when I sat down to think about exactly how couldn't quite pin down the specifics. No president had ever tried to do either of those things. So, how exactly could Trump pull them off? Well, we're now beginning to see. Let's start with elections. The Washington Post, and yes, there's still good reporting going on there, reported Thursday that pro-Trump activists, a rather generous and perverse use of that word, I think, who say that they're working with the Trump administration, are circulating a 17-page draft executive order that claims China interfered in the 2020 election as a basis to declare a national emergency that would unlock extraordinary presidential power over voting. And again, this is exactly what he's been doing. We've been following this for a very, very long time. He is unlocking every single extraordinary presidential power that he has the ability to unleash. The plan would mandate voter ID and ban mail-in balloting, and calls on Trump to issue an executive order announcing both measures. The premise, it almost goes without saying, is a total lie. China did not interfere in the 2020 election. Trump and his people often said so, the implication being that China interfered on behalf of its old friend Joe Biden and his son Hunter, whose alleged business dealings in China left his father hopelessly compromised. And again, this is like a tactic that liars use. If you continuously say a lie enough times, people get really muddy on what the truth and what is a lie is. So if you are out there and there is something that you want to promote, even though you know it is false, baby, just keep saying it. None of it was true. Hunter Biden did have some business interests in China, but nothing that reached his father. The U.S. intelligence services studied foreign influence in the 2020 election, and in March 2021, the government released an intelligence report concluding that China, quote, considered but did not deploy influence efforts intended to change the outcome of the U.S. presidential election. In fact, the report found, and isn't this a surprise, the biggest foreign actor in 2020 was, you know it, say it with me, Russia, trying to help Trump. The primary effort the IC intelligence community uncovered revolved around a narrative that Russian actors began spreading as early as 2014, alleging corrupt ties between President Biden, his family, and other U.S. officials and Ukraine. And, you know, what Trump is doing here, again, if we want to take it back to, how relationships work is, usually when your boyfriend's cheating on you, a lot of times he'll say, "Are you cheating on me? I think you're cheating on me." And so that's exactly what President Trump did. President Trump kept saying, "Oh, the China is interfering to try and, help Hunter Biden and Joe Biden," when in reality, Russia was helping him. Everything, all relationships in the world, whether they be political or interpersonal, are pretty much the same. But Trump administration officials, including Attorney General Bill Barr, pushed the China lie aggressively. So it's very easy for Trump today to invoke China again and lie that the threat of even greater Chinese interference in 2026 demands that he take emergency measures. With respect to those measures, he has no power whatsoever to impose them. As anti-Trump legal expert Norm Eisen put it on Morning Joe Friday, just as the Supreme Court struck his supposed emergency powers over tariffs, he has even less here. That is true, but remember, between Tariff Liberation Day, which is April 2nd, 2025, and the day the Supremes finally ruled against Trump on tariffs, February 20th, 2026, more than 10 months passed. So in that gray area time, we screwed. Trump has no power to decree that voters must present ID or to end mail-in balloting, but that doesn't mean he can't at least try both. Under the Insurrection Act or some other dusty statute, he can declare a state of emergency. Then he can decide that said state permits, nay, requires him to take extraordinary measures. On October 5th, say, that might mean outlawing early voting. by October 13th, it might mean no mail-in voting. And we're already at the no mail-in voting. We're already trying that right now, and it's only April 1st. By October 29th, a reminder that all voters must present ID to vote. And by Sunday, November 1st, 2 days before the election, an announcement that all these reasonable measures have alas failed, and he is now forced, against his will, to postpone the election. Have trouble seeing that happen? I didn't think so. As for the media takeover, what I didn't foresee in 2024 was the aggressiveness of Trump patsy David Ellison, the CEO of Paramount Skydance, in trying to take over both CBS and CNN, but he wouldn't stop. Netflix bid $83 billion. Ellison topped that this week with a bid of $111 billion, and Netflix dropped out. Obviously, we know all this already because this is a bit of an old article. And somewhere in there, Ellison attended Trump's State of the Union address, and Trump took to social media to urge Netflix to remove Obama and Biden administration official Susan Rice from its board. I once would have written that this is how things go in tin pot dictatorships or in Viktor Orban's Hungary. But today, it's how things go in the United States of America. So picture this. It's October. The mystery Trump accuser, the one about whom those FBI files have strangely gone missing, has come forward. Her allegations against the president of the United States are lurid and, to most of the country, credible. Trump is down to 29% in the polls. The economy is still limping. The polls all indicate that the GOP is in for a historic thrashing. Democrats are favored to win the House, and by now are odds on to maybe take the Senate too. Their candidates in Alaska and Texas have now been pulled slightly ahead, and Trump declares a state of emergency and postpones the election. The Supreme Court issues an emergency stay, saying he can't do that, but the court has no army, and Trump does, along with a handful of lick-spittle governors who just might follow him down the whatever dark path he plows. That, not to mince words, is a coup d'etat. Will he get away with it? I don't know, but having effective control over how it is presented to viewers of CBS and CNN and readers of the Bezos-owned Washington Post, to say nothing of the already vast pro-Trump propaganda empire of Fox News and the rest, will certainly make it easier. That's how fascism descends, and it's becoming less and less hypothetical by the week. And this was an article that first appeared in Fighting Words, which is a weekly The New Republic newsletter, authored by editor Michael Tomasky. So I think that was a really good find. And I hadn't done this previously, but I did mean to quickly look up Michael Tomasky just to see what he is all about. I know I like to see. So he's the he is the editor of the New Republic at Large, and let's see, editor-in-chief of Democracy, and the editor-in-chief of Democracy, which is an American quarterly political journal. As of 2023, its website describes its focus as not being on policy papers, but on bigger picture, outside the box of thinking. So very lefty, but not as mainstream. He was born in 1960, and just, he's an author, progressive commentator, etc. Just so we know who we are dealing with there. But I thought that was a great article, really, really interesting. Let's go on to our last wacko mailbag. And this is something that can't even believe I don't know if I knew this was going on. It's from ProPublica, and this is from wacko Elise, and it says Utah bans polygraph tests for those reporting sexual assault. Sorry, my allergies are killing me this week, so I'm gonna have to drink a lot and get those microplastics in the system. I'm on a lot of medicine, though. Okay, so a state legislator was moved to sponsor the bill now signed into law following a Salt Lake Tribune ProPublica investigation that showed how polygraphs can re-traumatize sexual abuse victims. For years, Utah allowed government officials to do something other states banned: ask a person who reports a sexual assault to take a polygraph test. That will change soon. Earlier this month, state lawmakers passed a bill that prohibits police and other government officials from requesting polygraph tests for alleged sex assault victims. Governor Spencer Cox signed it into law on Thursday, and it goes into effect in May. Experts say that these tests are known to be especially unreliable with victims of sexual abuse. That's because victims may have stress and anxiety recounting their assault that the polygraph may interpret as deception. Other states don't allow them to be used with assault victims for this reason. It took 2 years and 3 legislative sessions for Utah State Representative Angela Romero, the House Minority Leader, to get the bill across the finish line. When she first sponsored it in 2024, she cited reporting from the Salt Lake Tribune and ProPublica as she told her fellow legislators the damaging effects polygraph tests can have on people who are reporting sexual abuse. In the case covered by the news outlets, state licensors asked a man to take a polygraph test after he reported that his therapist, Scott Owen, had touched him inappropriately. The test results indicated he was being deceptive, and that led the patient to drop his complaint. Owen was allowed to continue to practice for 2 more years until others came forward with similar allegations. Owen is now in prison after he admitted to sexually abusing patients. Romero said in a recent interview that she was determined to bring the bill back for that former patient. For me, it was really specifically for that one individual who was not believed, Romero said. And then their perpetrator went on to harm other people, which adds another layer to the trauma that you've already endured because you tried to stop it from happening to other people and no one believed you. Cox signed the legislation during a small ceremony at his office, telling Romero that she has been such a champion and made a difference and saved lives. The governor also nodded to the Tribune and ProPublica's reporting driving change. And I think that's good. I think that's good for now. We just have so much. I'm not that this is not important, but I think like that it's going to go into the history a little bit more. But if you wanted to read more about that, absolutely look it up. I think that's really interesting stuff. And thank you so much for bringing that to our attention, Elise. Let's move on and really quickly give everyone a shout out from the Patreon. Oh, and I have to go back to the enemy of the state too. From the Patreon, thank you so much to Christopher Fungi, our amazing dictator, and welcome our newest capitalist pig, Serena O. And hello to all my cuties. Hi. How are you? Thank you so much for contributing to this show every single month. I appreciate you so much. If you guys want to help support this show, that I put a lot of time into every week. And obviously, it's a very long show. We all put a lot of work into it. You can go to patreon.com/withoutaCountry and you can help support the show for as little as $6 a month. And with that, you get an extra bonus news story every single week. That is in the format of the show, but it is never discussed on this show. So it's a mystery. It is a mystery to you. Really quickly, I do want to go back to the enemy of the state. This enemy of the state this week is California Sheriff Chad Bianco. And this is at the top of the docket, Mike. Sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit. But this is from Democracy Docket. Kind of obsessed with this right now. Again, with all the issues that are going on with voting, Democracy Docket is just doing a lot more nuanced and in-depth investigations into different things that are happening with voting. And normally I wouldn't be overly concerned with voting because I do think that it is a pretty reliable form of expressing our wants as a democracy, our wants, our needs, our opinions. But, every day during Trump administration 2.0, it gets a little bit less reliable. So this is by Jen Rice, and this is from yesterday. California sheriff used non-existent quotes in legal defense of ballot seizures. A California sheriff who seized 650,000 ballots in an attempt to challenge last year's redistricting referendum is now facing allegations of using made-up quotations in a legal brief opposing a lawsuit challenging that seizure. Riverside County Sheriff Chad Bianco, a Republican who was also running for governor of California, oh goody, took custody of the ballots and began his own recount based on allegations of a huge discrepancy between ballots cast and counted. County officials said that figure stemmed from a volunteer group's misunderstanding of how votes are tabulated. So mess over mess over mess. In response, 4 Riverside County voters represented by the UCLA Voting Rights Project have filed a lawsuit with the California Supreme Court demanding Bianco return the seized ballots and accusing him of violating state election laws by removing the ballots from the custody of local election officials. In a brief filed Monday, the UCLA Voting Rights Project said Bianco and his private attorney, Robert Tyler, incorrectly cited a quotation in the brief they filed in opposition to the voters' lawsuit. In the filing, Bianco's attorney argued that the voters didn't have standing to file suit, citing a ruling in the case Common Cause v. Board of Supervisors that standing requires, quote, a grievance shared in substantially equal measure by all or a large class of citizens. But that quotation, quote, appears nowhere in the opinion, the plaintiff's attorneys noted. And they argued it was part of a concerning pattern throughout Bianco's brief. Several cases cited in the brief reference real cases, but point to non-existent quotes and made up holdings. Several citations are to cases that do not stand for the proposition respondent represents, they wrote. In fact, the Common Cause ruling cited in Bianco's brief actually demonstrates that the voters do have a standing, they noted. It's not the first time questionable quotations have found their way into consequential legal documents related to voting rights. In November, as the Wisconsin Supreme Court took steps toward striking down the state's congressional map, a conservative justice included a non-existent quote from a real past U.S. Supreme Court ruling in her dissent. Such non-existent quotes can be the result, and I knew, you guys know what's coming. As I was reading the article, the first time I was like, we know exactly what the problem is here. And I think, maybe 5 years ago, we would have been like, oh, the problem is they're lying, but it's obvious. And, even when using AI on this show, we've come across things where we're like, okay, well, this part is real, but where is this coming from? And this is the problem with artificial intelligence. And I recently moved from ChatGPT to Claude because, they're harvesting less information on Claude and Gemini. Claude at least has a little message at the bottom that ChatGPT does not, being like, yo, this is artificial intelligence and you should still fact check the information that we're giving you. But it says such non-existent quotes can be the result of lawyers using artificial intelligence to help draft their arguments, though it's unclear how they wound up in Bianco's brief. I mean, the same way that Andrew Cuomo used artificial intelligence to make, pages and pages of policy. Asked to Claire, and again, I think it's totally okay to use AI to compile a lot of data. Like if you are putting together a campaign, and I think if as a candidate you want it to be like, can you show me every municipal policy where they use this for housing or something, like that is what AI is great for doing research very quickly on a very large level, but not to create your own opinion. And certainly for quotes you need to, and this is not hard because you can just go to the decision and literally search the decision and make sure that the quote is in there. So this is crazy. Asked to clarify where the quotation came from and whether he had used AI to write the brief, Tyler, Bianco's attorney, responded in a written statement. We did note a few errors that we are correcting today, Tyler said. Unfortunately, the numerous petitions by the Attorney General and the former Attorney General have created multiple rush filings and very limited time to respond. So that's what's going on there. And again, it's always wild to me that we still have sheriffs. I think that's pretty crazy, but that is my enemy of the state this week. And, God help you. And we have a commenter saying, wait, I got to move stuff over here. Bianco is apparently polling the top 3 among gubernatorial candidates, but there are 10 Dems running and no one candidate has substantial polling numbers at this point. So that is interesting. So it's not I think the main thing to take away from that is he's not a nobody. So this is someone who has power and has at least a little bit of power and at least a little bit of a backing. And again, it doesn't surprise me, with Spencer Pratt polling as number 2 for mayor of Los Angeles. This is not surprising. It's wild who can get ahead and who the public backs. Okay. So let's move on now. I know I had mentioned last week that possibly the dictator, Christopher Fungi, would now maybe present a dictator article every week. And he told me that he didn't want to do it every week because that does sound like a lot of homework, and I agree. But he did send me an article, so it can be his article of the month, and I want to go over that today with you. It's a very interesting article as well. You guys are so amazing at picking really interesting things and finding really interesting things. So thank you. This is from Tangle. I subscribe to Tangle as well, but I didn't see this one. I think this might be a one that a part of Tangle that you have to pay for, because I subscribe to Tangle, but I do not to the paid version. So Christopher writes, below is an op-ed of sorts about literacy that I found interesting. Let's say a few weeks ago, you mentioned concern about some founding documents taking a joyride across the US and fear something might happen to them. At this rate, will people still be able to read them? Would love to hear your thoughts as well as your mother's thoughts on this from an educator's perspective. Well, my mom is officially retired, but still always an educator at heart. Was an educator before she was an educator and will be an educator till the day she dies, which I hope is a long time from now. So, because I want her to enjoy her life. Let's see. So this is from Tangle, Rebuilding Illiterate America, What's Behind the Reading Crisis and Its Possible Reversal by Audrey Moorhead from March 6th of this year. So this says, in the summer or fall of 2025, while idly scrolling through X, I came across a rather interesting article from Natalie Wexler's Substack, Minding the Gap. The article detailed the results of a small study of 85 English majors at 2 Kansas universities. Researchers had students read the opening paragraphs of Charles Dickens's Bleak House and tasked them with explaining the contents in plain English to a facilitator. And let me tell you, I would probably fail this. My reading comprehension since I was a little kid, for fiction, not good, because I just like make up my own thing in my head when it comes to fiction. I'm like, no, I didn't see that way. We're not great, because Bleak House is a nearly 200-year-old British novel, placing it firmly in an unfamiliar cultural context for the average American reader. Yeah, I really struggle. Like, I even tried to read what I imagine if you are British is not even a challenging read, and there was just so much British slang in it. I was like, I got to put this down. I have no idea what this person is saying. The students were given a dictionary, reference materials, and permission to use their cell phones to look up unfamiliar terms, which is great if you have to like read something for school. Obviously, I'm going to look it up. But like when I'm reading something for pleasure, if I have to constantly look up words, it ruins the flow of the reading. Essentially, the students weren't being tested on their own prior knowledge, only on their reading comprehension. But even in this open book environment, only 4 of the 85 students demonstrated a comprehensive understanding of the text. 32 showed a competent understanding, but they only understood half the text. The rest of the students were identified as problematic readers, almost totally unable to comprehend the passage. And I mean, never mind reading. When we talk about literacy, obviously we're talking about like literacy here. But even when we talk about, being illiterate, or like literacy in comprehension of news media, the amount of times that I have posted, a 90-second video, and this is more because people aren't watching the whole thing and are commenting and making a decision before they even get through it. And so I think that's not necessarily like literacy. But that's also a problem. I think making a decision about something because of who posted it or where it's posted. And so instead of actually listening to what the person has to say, you are just basically following a pattern. It's like, okay, well, Corinne usually feels this way, so I can then figure out how I think she is going to feel without watching this 90-second piece of content. And that is also problematic. Before you leave a comment on something online, you must consume the whole thing. If you don't consume the whole thing, do not leave a comment. Because then if you're leaving a comment that is misinformed, then other people are going to skip it and just look at the comments. And then, so if you think it's harmless, it's actually not. You are actively contributing to the spread of misinformation. Bad, not good, not good. Wexler, a writer who specializes in education and literacy, pointed out that the problematic readers' difficulties came from encountering words and phrases that they were unfamiliar with. I wrote that book. Even though they had access to research materials, Wexler wrote down, their unfamiliarity with Dickens's prose style and cultural world were so profound that they simply gave up trying to understand the text. The competent readers showed us similar unfamiliarity with these words and phrases, but were comfortable with their confusion. And I really love that, because I think like we are uncomfortable these days with being confused. And it's okay if you don't fully understand something to just be like, I don't fully understand this and I need to read more about it. I think that is such a better response than saying definitively, I am for this or I am against this, if in reality you just really don't understand. No one expects you to understand everything. As a recent college graduate with a bachelor's degree in English, and particularly as one whose junior and senior research projects centered on American literature from the same time period as Bleak House, I wish I could tell you I had been shocked at these results or that I thought the study was a fluke. Instead, these findings only confirmed what I had already seen among my own peers in high school, in Lynchburg, Tennessee, and in college at Harvard. Increasingly, young Americans aren't comprehending the things that they read. In fact, at the end of her article, Wexler recalled a different exploration of the death of deep reading, whose publication I remember quite vividly, The End of the English Major, a 2023 New Yorker investigation by Nathan Heller. For his piece, Heller interviewed college English professors and students around the country, including some from Harvard. Heller's piece didn't paint a pretty picture of Harvard English. It showcased students, including English majors themselves, talking about the unimportance of the degree, and professors glibly discussing students' declining interests and abilities in their subject. The article's release caused quite a stir at Harvard's Barker Center, the hub of the English department, so much so that the instructor of my sophomore tutorial, a class dedicated to learning about and applying various schools of literary criticism, adjusted the syllabus to spend a whole day at the end of the semester talking about the article and its implications for the field. And when we talk about the death of deep reading, not only does this have to do with comprehension, but this also goes back to a part of the book that I am reading, Soul and Focus by Johan Hari, I think it is. I said, yeah. And so the death of deep reading is not only our comprehension, but it's our ability to focus. So all these people who, can read really fast or who are reading on screens rather than on pages. I know we live in a digital world and everything, but there have actually been numerous studies done that say that people get a deeper understanding from reading something off a page rather than off of a screen. And I never use like a Kindle or anything, not because I'm better than you, just because I'm so sick of looking at screens that for me, looking at a page is a respite. Like nothing can interrupt that. Like I know a Kindle doesn't have notifications either, but I used to, like my ex-boyfriend used to read stuff off of his phone and I would be like, first of all, the screen is too small. And secondly, like just holding a book and looking at words and like even feeling like the texture of the paper under your hands to me is such it's like a meditative experience. It's completely different for me than even listening to a book on tape. And I just really take it in better. But there have been studies that actually back that up. And I don't know if it's just because we live in a world where we're kind of always passively reading our screens. Obviously, the words are the same, so there has to be something deeper there, but I'm still reading that book, so we'll see. Can't wait to dig into it more. It's so fascinating. Wexler highlighted one Harvard professor in Heller's piece who talked about her undergraduate's failure to understand 19th century syntax. Though, as she said, misunderstanding archaic syntax is an easier problem to address than the Kansas student's complete failure to comprehend Dickens. It's still likely a symptom of the same underlying condition, a systemic educational failure to teach students to engage with difficult texts. Natalie Wexler isn't the only person who's concerned with the state of reading among young Americans. In recent years, articles about Gen Z reading less or being unable to read have abounded, as have investigations into declining literacy rates among Gen Z, backed up by a plethora of studies. The full breadth of reporting and research depicts an American generation in a full-blown literacy crisis. I mean, I've met Gen Z, and I'm not saying this like as a, looking down on Gen Z in any way, but I've met several Gen Z people that I gotta be honest, I don't think ever read a book, and I'm not fucking with you. Like, literally have never consumed a full book. And I know you think, like, how can you get through school with that? Well, it's like, well, I mean, I'm a millennial, and even we had Cliff's Notes. And just straight up, many of the books that I was required to read in school, I did not fully read because I wanted to read what I wanted to read. And I didn't want to read the books that we were reading in school. But obviously, I still had to take tests on them and, talk about them in class. And I did so just fine without anyone knowing, using Cliff's Notes. So there you go. And by this, I mean, okay, not any weird fucking stuff, whatever it means, whatever it means this week. But that's not to say the crisis is hopeless. Running parallel to these stories about college students unable to understand the texts they encounter is the story of gradual recovery at the elementary school level, spearheaded by the unlikeliest of educational heroes. I'm talking, of course, about the Southern surge in reading education. Elementary schoolers in Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, and Tennessee are improving in reading scores at astonishing rates, outpacing states like California and Vermont, despite the latter spending more on education per student by comfortable margins. Mississippi, which led the charge starting in the 2010s, has overseen such great improvements that its former state superintendent, Carrie Wright, was hired by the state of Maryland to deliver similar results there. The literacy crisis is one of the most profound problems facing Gen Z and Gen Alpha. As my generation ages up into the workforce and the citizenry, lower literacy rates mean a decline in the ability to understand the world around us, including the laws and political texts upon which this country was built. And if fewer Americans understand the texts that shape our society will be susceptible to changing for the worse, forgetting the whys and the hows that built the most successful, prosperous nation on earth. In the belly of that forgetting lies the possibility of national decline. And to me, someone who was always advocating for a Fox News for the left, because I understand that literacy and reading comprehension is important, but what is more important, and I would say more urgent right now, is just making sure people understand, period. So even if we have to use smaller words to make sure that they understand, and this probably would never happen with the way that our government is right now, but I think a really great thing would be to upgrade things or basically do modern translations of things like the Constitution so that it is in modern English. But for us to do that, we would all have to agree, the right and the left would have to agree on what our forefathers meant in their wording. But I think that is something that is, really worth looking into. The problems, according to a 2025 analysis from Chad Alderman at the 74, an education reform news organization, American achievement across educational disciplines, including reading, peaked in the mid-2010s. The pattern shows up across 3 different national tests at 4 different grade levels: 4th, 8th, 10th, and 12th. The decline U.S. schools have experienced since then, which was exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, sharply correlates with growing achievement gaps between the highest and lowest performing American students. Put differently, high achieving students are doing about as well as they were, but struggling students are falling further and further behind. In a different analysis on how we measure literacy, Alderman utilized the simple view of reading, SVR, a widely accepted theory that reading is broken up into two primary components: word recognition and language comprehension. Alderman found that American literacy declines can be traced to breakdowns in instruction for both components. The first component of literacy instruction under SVR is decoding or word recognition. This is how we teach young readers to identify letters and common combinations of letters called graphemes, string those graphemes together to form words, and then connect those written words to the spoken ones they've already learned how to understand. For centuries of English reading instruction, decoding was taught via phonics, teaching kids to associate graphemes with their sounds, like th or ch, then to string those sounds together when encountering new words. Alternate approaches have existed since at least the 19th century, but phonics remained dominant in American schools until roughly the mid 20th century with the rise of whole language teaching, a method of reading instruction that started in New Zealand but became entrenched in American schools. In this method of teaching, students aren't taught to identify letters with sounds individually. Instead, they learn how to identify the whole word at once without worrying about the letters or about what letters comprise the word. The excellent APM Reports podcast Sold a Story details what drove the rise of this method of learning. Its chief advocate was New Zealand researcher Marie Clay, who worked with struggling adult readers, usually those with learning disabilities like dyslexia. Clay found that these readers apparently learned best when they memorized words and used context clues, like other known words or pictures, to identify new words that they encountered. Clay believed that by applying these principles to all beginning readers, literacy rates would increase even among poor readers. But researchers who looked into the science of reading identified a disturbing problem. This method of reading instruction didn't actually improve learning. When new readers were taught to over-rely on context clues or words they already knew, their guesses at new words became wilder, profoundly impacting their ability to comprehend the meaning of a sentence. By contrast, according to Emily Hanford's research for her reading podcast, Hard Words, hundreds of studies back up the successes of phonics instruction in teaching children how to read well. Even so, teachers across the country continued to practice the whole language method, or in some cases, a mixture of whole language instruction and phonics instruction devised by Lucy Calkins, called balanced literacy. Replicated studies have shown that whole language curriculum remains harmful to beginning readers. And while balanced literacy might be a step better, no scientific findings show that it can compete with phonics. Yet both whole language instruction and balanced instruction are still taught in many places across the United States. Of course, decoding through phonics instruction is just one piece of the literacy puzzle. Within the simple view of reading, the second component of literacy instruction is language comprehension. This concept refers to how we teach kids to put words together in a more abstract sense so that they can understand phrases, sentences, and higher level concepts. Language comprehension works best when readers have a strong foundation of decoding skills, but language comprehension also requires a much broader range of skills than does decoding, and failures of language comprehension include a wider range of educational abilities. Despite the recent attention phonics education has gotten, in no small part due to the explorations like Sold a Story, failures of language comprehension probably comprise the biggest challenge to raising literacy among young people. For one thing, and when we talk about lower rates of literacy, that also speaks into or feeds into why we are consuming news the way we are consuming it. So it's like, yeah, you probably don't really know any young people or many young people who read newspapers. I'm even talking what a newspaper on a website, and they're consuming things, the news more in short form content. And part of it's because they live in a digital world and that's what they're familiar with. And I certainly consume a lot of news that way. But I also consume a lot of newspaper news because I know sometimes it's much more, even if I'm getting a story, in a 90-second blip, I'm going to want more details than that. And that's what you're going to find in written news. For one thing, a lack of language comprehension encompasses a wide range of lower reading ability. It includes Harvard students who struggle with 200-year-old syntax, Kansan English majors who can't comprehend Victorian vocabulary, and the 54% of American adults whose reading ability is below the 6th grade level. The breadth of this group showcases the remarkable scope in the decline in reading levels among the general population. A few theories attempt to explain how language comprehension could be the ongoing source of literacy decline. First, since students are reading less, their reading education is focused more on test preparation and skill building than actually building an understanding. This is the popular teaching to the test theory. Rather than helping students understand whole short stories or novels, teachers are focusing on task completion according to state standards. Instead of reading Hatchet or Harry Potter and talking about the text as a whole, students are asked to look at short excerpts from these texts and identify setting, mood, or character traits. These skills are important to developing language comprehension, of course, but studying them in isolation doesn't help students develop the ability to unite these ideas into a cohesive understanding. And also, and this is so me, but a lot of times, especially for authors who have been dead for a long time, when we would go over in English class, like what the author meant, my thought, as a 16-year-old was always like, how the fuck do you know this is what the author meant? Like, yeah, for some things, like we can surmise this is what they meant, but unless they ever explicitly wrote, yo, this is what I meant, unless they were on a podcast, which they weren't because they were dead before podcasts came. Like, I just always wondered, I'm like, well, this is what scholars have deduced that they meant. It doesn't necessarily mean that's what they meant. As someone who is an artist, many times things I've said that are way less complex than, old English literature have been misinterpreted. So, I don't know. Another even more alarming theory is that the problem is rooted in the mass adoption of screens and the rise of short-form video, which are killing reading skills in adults and hampering skill development in students. 72% of high school teachers and a third of middle school teachers report phone distraction as a major problem in their classrooms, meaning screens are diverting focus from and eroding the attention spans required to learn critical lessons. In short, students are distracted by screens during instruction time, and the distraction isn't just keeping them from learning more, it's actively setting them back. Again, I'm on my phone a lot for work, but I actively feel it causing pain to my brain. There is a brain fog that is created when I put my phone down for several hours, even if it's just to put together this show. My brain feels so much better. I think it is making us dumber. It is spreading misinformation. It is, and I think it's actively keeping us distant from our friends and from our boyfriends, girlfriends, husbands, and wives. I see phone distraction as such a problem in so many things. I've talked about this on GWF a lot. Phone distraction has been one of the number one problems in, I would say, and it's been a problem in almost any relationship I've had in the past 10 years. I feel like not like so much in my current relationship, but like it is something that needs to be watched in every relationship. Or like when there is a quiet moment, like the other person will just like instinctively pick up their phone, and we're not even like doing it because we don't want to, speak to the other person. We're doing it because there was a moment of silence and we need to be constantly entertained. Like, I just invite you to watch your consumption of that. Even the fact that I'm doing, a 2.5, 3 hour show here every week, like it is on a screen, but at least it's long form content. And so obviously I'm going to try to promote my own show, but I do think that even if you are someone who sits down for this show every week, this is still so much wildly better for your brain than short form content. And again, I create short form content. It is part of what I have to do to survive as a stand-up comedian. But, hopefully stand-up clips just inspire you to come and see stand-up comedians live and then, enjoy their long-form content. It was actually a conversation online today that because there's so much short-form content among stand-up comedians, many comedians can't even do long-form content anymore, meaning a lot of comedians that are now famous and online don't even have an hour or 45 minutes. Like, I would take 45 minutes. Sometimes if I'm doing a show, because you kind of only get, as a headliner, you basically only get an hour of time. Like, that's what you're kind of allocated. And so sometimes I do leave like 15 minutes to do crowd work because I enjoy engaging with the crowd. Like that is fun and it works a different muscle. But if anyone is giving you less than like 40, 45 minutes of stand up, that's not good. Can we fix it? If we understand the literacy crisis among young Americans as a multi-pronged problem, we must also understand that it requires a multi-pronged solution. A few stories offer these solutions. The Southern Surge shows success at the state or regional level. Yes, but localities from Los Angeles to rural Ohio provide replicable models as well. A common denominator in those breakthroughs has been science of reading policies, which emphasize mastering phonics and building a comprehensive understanding of language. This approach shows promise in shoring up literacy problems grounded in poor decoding skills. The success of these policies depends on instructing teachers on how to implement the new approach, but the states that have done so have demonstrated incredible improvement. The Mississippi Miracle is undoubtedly the biggest reading instruction success story of recent years. Over the course of just 13 years, Mississippi went from ranking 49th on national fourth grade reading tests to the top 10. That's really impressive. The New York Times reports that Mississippi's success centers on two major policy shifts: encouragement of the science of reading approach and the adoption of school accountability policies, grading schools on an A to F scale, and rewarding schools that showed high rates of improvement. And in Louisiana, Tennessee, and Alabama, the other of the Southern Surge states, Mississippi-inspired policies have produced similar results. Karen Bates coined the term Southern Surge in February 2025 in a blog post outlining the various policies the four states implemented that led to improved reading skills. Bates identified several multi-layered and sustained investments in the science of reading. Among these principles were teacher retrainings, a return to phonics instruction at the lower levels, and more whole text curricula at various grade levels. Bates stressed that each of these states committed to these principles for the long haul, spending years, even decades, building up local buy-in to the curricula they hoped to implement and investing heavily in creating highly effective curricula. Of course, that raises the question, what exactly makes curricula highly effective? And that question is directly related to the second, more complicated component of improving reading instruction. Maybe I should learn how to read. Language comprehension. Alderman found these questions to be integral to understanding the decline in college readiness he identified. In analyzing the need for improvements in language comprehension, Alderman pointed out that reading comprehension often requires strong vocabulary and background knowledge on various subjects. And let me tell you, as someone who does stand up almost every night of the week, obviously you don't need strong vocabulary for stand-up. It doesn't really work. And most times you want like a punchier word, but background knowledge on various subjects. And this is a conversation point that I have had with numerous stand-up comedians. You do need background knowledge on various subjects. And I'm not talking about school subjects. I'm just talking about life shit, general things you would do in life. People have a narrower and narrower view of the world based on kinds of things they know. And it is so apparent when I am doing stand-up comedy, especially on the weekends when you're going to have more tourists than New Yorkers. And it is fucked. People don't know shit about shit, like anything. It is really, really scary. I don't know what they're like consuming, or and maybe it's because we're watching other people experience the world on our screens instead of going out and having experiences for ourselves. I don't really know what the fuck is happening, but it's frightening. To borrow from his rather apt example, readers might be able to decode the sound of semi-quincentennial, but without an understanding of the Latin prefixes in the word, they'd have no clue what it means. To solve this problem, education writers like Bates and Wexler argue that schools need to reintroduce whole book instruction in schools, and that one method for doing so sorry, I got a notification from my thing. That one method for doing so could be reorienting state testing. That solution might seem counterintuitive at first. After all, if students were showing improvements in existing tests with changes to their teaching method, then why would states need to change their tests? But Wexler found that changing the test produced a surprising result. The achievement gap began to disappear. What do you need? In Louisiana, researchers developed a new prototype state tests that ask questions about content and knowledge instead of just skills development. The reading comprehension test presented questions on science or history topics the students had studied, as well as questions on whole novels like The Giver that were covered in class. Louisiana students who took this new test reported less anxiety, and this reduced anxiety was also associated with improved test scores in lower performing students. Now, Texas is experimenting with a new mandatory literacy curriculum, and Wexler expressed hope that the Lone Star State could show similar results as its eastern neighbor. I'd be remiss, though, not to talk about the extent skepticism toward these improvements. Extant, meaning EXTANT. I know I said like extent. For one thing, despite large improvements in the southern states among third and fourth graders, those gains haven't necessarily carried over to the eighth grade or higher levels. And some cities and districts that have tried to implement science of reading, phonics-based approaches haven't replicated the same improvements that the southern surge states have, meaning those policies may not be the magic solution to all of our literacy problems. If that's the case, then education policymakers may have to broaden their exploration of effective strategies. And as reading scores nationwide continue to dip, months and years sunk into exploring these theories could be time states will never get back, leading more students to fall further behind. Even with those caveats, the fact that some states are demonstrating improvements at some levels, even as the rest of the country continues to lag, is cause for hope. The lack of carryover at the middle school and older grades might soon be rectified in Mississippi, as the education department hopes to receive funding to boost literacy coaching beyond early elementary school. And the continued spotlight on these success stories shows that educators and policymakers are taking the decline in American literacy seriously, which in this political climate might be all that we can ask for. Literacy matters. Maybe even after reading about the decline in literacy rates and the efforts to reverse the trend, you're not convinced of the importance of rebuilding a literate America. And that might be fair. Humans survived in primarily oral cultures for centuries, even millennia. Maybe the decline of literacy will create a more democratic culture, one where everyone has access to roughly the same cultural information, regardless of natural intellectual ability or educational attainment. Good points. One where politicians and pundits are always speaking to and including those who struggle the most with reading. One where the cultural elite can no longer gatekeep power. And again, after reading this article, even crazier that establishment Democrats speak to constituents in the way they do, because, I get it. Maybe you want to purposefully gatekeep, but when we talk about losing votes, guys, if you are still speaking to people in political and legal jargon as the American literacy rate declines, you're asking to lose. You're asking to lose. And, sometimes or, oftentimes people turn their nose up at me when me as a leftist am saying that we need to speak to people in simpler terms. Like they have this, they have this want and this need for people to, for the constituents to meet, I guess, the candidates where they're at. And that is a losing strategy. I am not saying that we should just that everyone's getting dumber and we should be okay with that. But what we want to do is we have to make sure everyone headed to the polls understands what is going on and what each candidate is offering. And then hopefully, if we meet people where they're at, once elected, if Democrats start getting elected again, or if leftists starts getting, elected again, then they can take into their own hands this literacy issue and tackle it from a legislative perspective, and by funding schools and by not, defunding the Department of Education, things like by putting people at the helm who actually have a background in education, not wrestling. But I want to point to an example of what literacy can do, indeed has done for Americans. In fact, I'll go back to the 19th century, the era of Bleak House, to tell this story, one so near and dear to my heart that I decided to spend a year writing about it for my senior thesis. In February 1818, a Black child was born a slave on a Maryland plantation. For the first decade or so of his life, he lived amid cruelty and squalor. He never knew his mother or father. He was separated from his grandmother at a young age, and witnessing the cruel beating of his aunt left an indelible mark on his psyche. He knew only despair and evil continually. At about the age of 12, he was lent out to a new master in Baltimore. There, his master's wife was not yet accustomed to having a slave. She treated the boy with kindness, often reading the Bible to him. This piqued his curiosity, and he asked his mistress to teach him how to read it himself. She obliged until her husband intervened. He knew the dangerous ideas that reading would bring to the young slave. The mistress submitted to her husband, becoming a vehement convert against the cause of the boy's education. But the damage had already been done, damage in quotes. The boy had tasted knowledge, and that was enough. When he did chores in town, away from the mistress's watchful eye, he convinced white neighborhood boys to lend him their grammar primers. He drew letters in the dirt, making up a game in which the boys helped him learn to read the letters and words. He saved up his small allowance and bought a copy of the Columbian Orator, a popular textbook that contained passages from famous books, poems, and speeches throughout history, from Aesop's Fables to Paradise Lost to George Washington's farewell address. From these texts, he taught himself not only how to understand words at the most basic level, but how to understand the highest concepts of Western civilization, the meanings of liberty, faith, virtue, and honor. I'm a dork, but this is giving me chills. Reading lit a fire in the boy. He understood now the true weight of his enslaved condition. Yes. Obviously, this is like literal slavery, but you can be enslaved by a cult. You can be enslaved by a concept. So if people were able to improve their literacy rate, they could read things and they could really see for themselves what is happening to their minds, and how they are enslaved by the words they are reading or what they are being told. But he also understood that he could cast off those chains. And when he eventually made his escape, he was not content to live quietly. Instead, he turned to writing and speaking himself, making a case for the liberation of his people, grounded in the understanding of the principles he encountered when he first learned how to read. The words he wrote and spoke left their own indelible mark on the annals of American history. They championed a vision of a country truly dedicated to the principles upon which it was supposedly founded. In recounting his journey to literacy, Frederick Douglass, we all knew it, framed the gift of reading like this: the reading of these speeches added much to my limited stock of language and enabled me to give my tongue to many interesting thoughts, which had frequently flashed through my soul and died away for want of utterance. He borrowed the words of his own master, learning to read, quote, forever unfit him for the duties of a slave. Because he could read, he could understand his condition and could begin to show his contemporaries why his slavery was at odds with the principles of liberty and freedom laid out in the Declaration of Independence and even the Constitution. Today, Americans struggle to read and understand the language of Douglass and his contemporaries. They struggle to read and understand the language of the founding documents. They struggle to understand American civic history. All right, great article. I know it was a little long, but I think that was really important. And a concept that we love to talk about here. I love literacy. I love book banning. I love access to information. These are a few of my favorite things. But thank you so much for sending that in. Great dictator article. Very interesting. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And I know that I have a lot of educators who listen to this show. So hopefully that inspires you. And thank you, as always, for the work that you do. Sorry, I am congested. All right. A little microplastics and we move on. I kind of have a theory that single New Yorkers might be some of the biggest consumers of microplastics because we get takeout more often than other people. I don't really know what to do about it. It's, every now and then you'll come across a place that does that has the eco-friendly takeout containers, but it's 1 in every 300. But that's a problem we'll tackle tomorrow, I guess. Now on to our main stories. I just want to do a quick Iran war update. Don't we love 2026? So I know Prezi Trump has been saying that like Iran is asking for a ceasefire. This is as of today. Iran has strongly rejected claims by Donald Trump that Tehran is seeking a ceasefire in the war. They called them, quote, false and baseless. Trump even claimed on social media that Iran requested a ceasefire. And Iranian officials, including Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, asserted that they are not accepting one. Furthermore, there was and it's an interview, so I'm not going to read it because you guys know I hate reading like podcast interviews, like the transcript of them on the show. They just do not go. But Democracy Now! Did this investigation about something called Project Maven, right? And what Project Maven revealed is that they're using AI to help pick targets in Iran, which is like, I know everyone's already pretty upset about AI to begin with, but this is especially alarming when they're bombing school children. But yeah, it's a Palantir project, not surprisingly. It's Palantir's Project Maven. It says a Democracy Now! Investigation highlighted Project Maven, a secretive Palantir-run system helping the Pentagon pick bomb targets in Iran. A story largely underreported in mainstream outlets, because that's something that I kind of scan media every week. There's usually some exclusives or things that are only picked up in one place. And again, this seems like something that we would want picked up in other places. Mike, I know you're always or on Palantir's case, I guess. Is this something that you even knew about?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people have been, bragging about the efforts of AI, that are going into the war in Iran. I know Palmer Luckey just did like a big, hey, look at all these cool things that I have. Like, check out my toy closet to 60 Minutes, because Bari Weiss's CBS is essentially just North Korean state news at this point. But
Right.
a lot of people are a lot of stuff has been talked about, AI being used for different things in this war. I think they said, like, they were actually bragging about the fact that because it was AI, they were able to like trick it with like fake helicopters and stuff. So like we wasted hundreds of millions of dollars in munitions bombing like paintings on the ground because that's what AI detected.
Amazing. Really amazing stuff. It's good to know that human life is literally in the hands of AI at this point. It came quicker than we could have even imagined. Um and then let's talk about the Strait of Hormuz. This is in Michael's opinion, the biggest story of the week. And I'm not saying that like as if it's not. I'm crediting you with thinking that it is the biggest one.
I wouldn't stop at the
your
week.
story.
I would say decade, maybe the century.
Okay. Again, not being, it was, obviously, oh God, Bloomberg. Sorry, I was going to read it from Bloomberg because that was kind of the biggest story, but I got to go to this archive thing and see if I can get past the Bloomberg paywall. 1 second. Let's see. Did you get through the Bloomberg paywall?
You know it.
Okay, I'll just read it from your screen then. Let me get this off. Okay, so just make sure to follow along with me, please. All right. So secret codes and yuan fees get ships through Iran's Hormuz toll booth. Vessels wanting to transit the strategic waterway need to be from friendly countries, and some have to pay fees in Chinese currency or crypto before being escorted through the strait. Let me see. I'm just going to move this to this other screen where I can see it better. 1 sec. Okay, here. Yeah, I need it on this side. Okay. So in recent days, the operator of an oil tanker struck in the Persian Second, the Persian Gulf received a compelling proposal. After weeks at anchor with missiles and drones passing overhead, it could finally sail safely out through the Strait of Hormuz and into the open ocean, escorted by the Iranian Navy. But first, it would need to change its registration and raise the flag of Pakistan, according to a company executive speaking on condition of anonymity in order to discuss sensitive conversations. The company wasn't able to take up the offer, which came from the government of Pakistan. Iran agreed to allow 20 Pakistani vessels to transit through the strait, but the country only had a few flagged ships in the Gulf. Islamabad began reaching out to some of the world's biggest commodity traders to see if they had vessels that could transit Hormuz while temporarily sailing under a Pakistani flag, according to people with knowledge of the discussions. One of the people said that Pakistan was looking for the biggest ships it could find within the region, including oil supertankers capable of carrying 2 million barrels each. Arranging their passage would be a way to show the success of diplomatic efforts to bring the conflict to an end. At least 2 large oil trading houses have received the offer. Pakistan's Ministry of Maritime Affairs did not respond to requests for comment. The arrangement shows how Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is exerting considerable control over shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, the critical maritime choke point through which a fifth of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas normally transits. People in the shipping industry and government officials with direct knowledge of negotiations said that the IRGC is already extracting tolls from vessels passing through and giving preferential treatment to ships from countries it deems to be friendly, while threatening to attack those from countries it sees as aggressive. And then there's a little graph. If you're following along visually, the commercial ships seen transiting the waterway out of the Persian Gulf. And yeah, just a breakdown of that. All right. Iran's National Security Committee has approved a bill that would impose fees on Strait of Hormuz, the semi-official Fars news agency reported, citing a member of the committee. The contours of a more formal system are now emerging based on the accounts of multiple people with the knowledge of the situation speaking on condition of anonymity, as they aren't authorized to talk to the media. Ship operators have to contact an intermediary company linked to IRGC and provide information about their vessel's ownership, flag, the cargo manifest, destination, crew list, and data from its automated identification system, or AIS, a transponder that ships use to record and broadcast their position. The intermediary passes the file on to the IRGC Navy's Hormozgan Provincial Command for background checks on the ship to make sure that it has no links to Israel or the US or other states that Iran considers to be enemies. If a vessel makes the cut, then discussions over the toll begin. The people said that the Iranians have a ranking system of 1 to 5 for nations, with ships from countries that are seen as friendly more likely to get better terms. For oil tankers, the starting price in the negotiations is typically around $1 per barrel of oil, paid in yuan or stable coins, cryptocurrencies pegged to the value of hard currency. A very large crude carrier, or VLCC, typically has a capacity of around 2 million barrels. Once the toll is paid, the IRGC issues a permit code and route instructions. Ships are expected to raise the flag of the nation that negotiated the passage agreements, and in some instances, to change their official registration to that country. As it approaches the Strait of Hormuz, the ship broadcasts its passcode over its very high-frequency radio and is met by a patrol boat that escorts it through the passage, close to the coast between a group of islands that has already been dubbed the Iranian toll booth by people in the industry. Vessel tracking data shows that ship transits through the Strait of Hormuz has increased slightly over the past week, albeit to a fraction of pre-war levels. And again, there is a graph to short this. Average two-way transits through the Strait of Hormuz climbed in the past week. And the legal basis for Iran's imposition of a toll isn't clear. Countries typically have territorial boundaries extending 12 nautical miles, around 14 miles or 22 kilometers, from their coastline in which they are allowed to inspect vessels. Iran wrote in a letter this month to the International Maritime Organization, the world shipping watchdog, that ships associated with non-hostile states are able to receive safe passage through Hormuz. It added that it was restricting those it considered hostile. As the coastal state bordering the strait, the Islamic Republic of Iran, in full conformity with established principles and rules of international law, has restricted the passage of vessels belonging to or associated with the aggressors, it said in the letter. The Iranian justification is that this is an exercise of their rights to self-defense, and therefore they need to check the vessels. And in checking these vessels, you need to pay a fee. Jason Chua, professor of commercial and maritime law at City University London, said, now, from the perspective of most international law commentators, this is not legal. Ship owners and operators face difficult legal questions over whether they should pay tolls, which rules, sanctions, and conventions may be applied to them by the US and Iran, and what might be covered by their insurance. I think that the Iranian war has thrown up a lot of challenges and questions for international law, perhaps partly because both sides seem to have been engaged in activities which, to put it mildly, are highly controversial under international law or under established rules, Chua said. Insurance costs have spiked dramatically for ships that want to cross the Straits of Hormuz. Several vessels have been hit by projectiles while at anchorage in the Persian Gulf or in the strait. On March 31st, a Kuwaiti oil tanker was struck by at least one drone near Dubai, causing a fire and damage to the hull. U.S. promises of naval escorts, as yet unfulfilled, and state-backed insurance have not reassured ship owners enough that they're willing to risk their crews. Negotiating access with the IRGC may not be seen as a safe option either. Notwithstanding the physical risks and the cost of insurance, making deals with the IRGC, which is subject to sanctions by the US, European Union, and the UK, puts ships at risk of violating sanctions or anti-money laundering rules, experts said. US President Donald Trump said on Tuesday night that he wants to end the U.S. war with Iran within 2 or 3 weeks, which we talked about before this, whether or not the Strait of Hormuz is reopened. After his comments, Israel and the U.S. continued to strike Iran, which fired missiles and drones at targets across the region, with one projectile hitting an oil tanker in Qatari waters. On Wednesday morning today, Trump said that a ceasefire would only be possible if the strait was opened. The existence of an Iranian-backed safe passage deal doesn't mean that the dangers to shipping have reduced, according to Basil Germund, chair in international security at Lancaster University and a visiting fellow at the UK's Royal Navy Strategic Studies Centre. For this approach to work, Tehran needs to maintain its capability to credibly threaten commercial shipping in the Strait and the Gulf, he said. To be credible, Tehran needs to attack tankers from time to time. And Mike, I know we talked a little bit about this off air, but if you wanted to just go in, since this is your favorite story of the week, what is it to you that says this is the most important story? I'm sorry, did you say of the decade?
Yeah, I mean, just the idea that yuan is being exchanged for petrol at this point, like, dollars have been there's a reason.
How British of you, right?
What?
I said petrol. How British of you?
No, the petrol dollar is like.
Yes.
Yeah, like that's a common term. If that becomes the petrol yuan,
right,
the United States influence globally is going to go way down, right? All of our treasury bonds are going to get hit tremendously because if countries don't need American dollars to buy oil anymore, then what's the point of having American dollars, right? Like the value of the American dollar is going to go way down. And just for everything that's going on with China's Silk Road initiative, like the inroads that they have made to these countries that we are making very hostile enemies of the United States. I think it makes sense why Pete Hegseth today was talking about, or not today, this week was talking about like the greater North American empire, because you really got to start shoring things up if China is just going to become the number one global superpower. And it seems like this Strait of Hormuz is the first domino to fall in the, like the dollar's going out of fashion and the yuan taking its place as the dominant global currency.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, not good. I mean, and then there's been multiple, because of the Trump administration and us pissing everyone off. There's been like, multiple instances where countries that we used to have some sort of relationship or are cool with are basically trying to like elbow us out, and guess who's next in the line? China, to be a world power. All right. I guess let's move on to the Artemis launch. Ugh, very into this. This is from Artemis 2. I'm reading this straight from NASA. So basically, what I just wanted to see is like, not that I don't care who's going, but like I wanted to see like what are we trying to do here with having this moon launch, right? So it says on the nasa.gov site, Artemis 2 science operations will lay the foundation for safe and efficient human exploration of the moon and Mars. What we'll learn, the Artemis 2 mission will carry astronauts farther from Earth and closer to the moon than any human has been in over half a century. From this unique vantage point and environment, the Artemis 2 crew will work with scientists on Earth to facilitate science investigations to inform future human spaceflight missions. So like, as per my understanding from other articles I read, we're kind of just like, this is kind of a check-in. Like, we haven't done this in a long time. We got to see what is going on and what we were able to do at this point. And they have like more information on it, but like they kind of summarized it. Oh, this took me out of nasa.gov, but I wanted to go to fully nasa.gov again. Burn complete. Okay. So and like, if you want to go to nasa.gov, you can really follow along the launch. They launched from Kennedy Space Center in Florida at 6:35 p.m. Eastern time, which is also where Space Camp is. It's right near there. I mean, it's in Florida. And let me see. There's another one too, but the one I went to is in Florida. Let's see what's going here. Yeah, forging new frontiers. The first crewed Artemis flight marks a key step toward long-term return to the moon and future missions to Mars. Artemis 2 builds on the success of the uncrewed Artemis 1, which happened in 2022, and will demonstrate a broad range of capabilities needed on deep space missions. The Artemis 2 test flight will be NASA's first mission with crew aboard the SLS Space Launch System rocket and Orion spacecraft. And they have minute by minute updates here if this is something you're interested in. Like, this is like, I am very interested in this. I should have watched the launch, but I was preparing for the show instead. Let's see. Yeah. So NASA's newest spacecraft, Orion, is developed to be capable of sending astronauts to the moon and is a crucial step toward eventually sending crews onto Mars. The Orion spacecraft, okay, we already got into this. Again, so like, I don't think there's like that much to go over. My main concern was that the mission safely launched, because I was very worried when they were having all those problems and kind of what they were doing. But it really seems to be like, this is a check-in. If this is successful, if everything looks like as it should, then we will see more in the future. And then what does this say? And of course, then the Atlantic had to do a piece that was like, why doesn't anybody realize we're going back to the moon? Well, I think no one realizes we're going back to the moon because things are so bad here on Earth that people can't really think about the moon, you know?
I know every
CBS
time
News.
I Google NASA, I just keep seeing their scientists go missing. So,
Oh, right. Okay. Classic
I'm
move.
I'm not kidding. Like, literally, try Googling NASA instead of getting the space launch. You will get news articles about missing scientists.
Yeah. And then with scientists are, they're the enemy right now of this administration. And here are some other bullet points to know for the launch today. So they're sending out 4 astronauts on a 9.5-day journey around the moon and back. If all goes to plan, the crew will get an unprecedented, word of the century, view of the far side of the moon and set a record for the farthest distance ever traveled from Earth, which is 252,000 miles. Let's see. Again, they had some problems, and this was just some problems that they had previously. Artemis 2 is intended as a test flight to check out systems and equipment, laying the groundwork for future missions to land astronauts on the moon in 2028. So again, that's kind of what they're doing here, because it's been 50 years since we've done this. They're like, hey, like, do we still know how to do this? Is this safe? Like, what has anything changed, I guess, on the surface of the moon that we couldn't see? Is everything okay? Can we do this further exploration? And I think that is pretty cool. All right, so moving on to the No Kings March, our other main story of the week. The No Kings that happened this past Saturday. I was there. I hope you were there too. And again, like, this is something that I think I talk about this pretty openly. I am, I kind of am someone who, at this point, with the work that I've done, to me, like, protesting for one day, marching for one day is kind of like filed at this point under bare minimum. And like, is it really even helping? Like, what are we even doing? What is going out with a sign that you made from, cardboard from CVS, for 2 hours, like, really doing, especially when this is an administration that doesn't care, doesn't care if you don't like them. I guess at a certain point, they some of the people need to like them, but this is the second term, and if he's not leaving the White House, he's not doing it via democracy anyway, so it kind of doesn't really matter. But with the thought of meeting people where they're at, and with so many new people showing up to every No Kings March, people who are finally dissatisfied with this administration, who finally are saying enough is enough, who, saw whatever it was that got people out, whether it was, a lot of people saying the war in Iran, or, Americans, being murdered in the street by ICE, or ICE in general, whatever it was, more and more people are getting out. And I did think that was important. So even though I don't know how much it's doing, I certainly showed up, because I don't think doing nothing is the solution. And I did march with, Americans United for Separation of Church and State. I was able to check in with them. I had been looking forward to doing that, because I just have so much problems with the lack of separation between church and state. Even when I was like, you're watching Melania and they're going to Jimmy Carter's funeral, and like they're all in church together for that. And like, obviously I know like someone's funeral is going to be like in the church, like, but then again, it's just like, it seems like we're really never separating it. And where does it separate? Because obviously, like, whatever religion Jimmy Carter is, that's the way he is going to be buried, and that's his prerogative. And everyone can join there, but like, we're still having elected officials sit and pray together, under a certain umbrella of prayer. And then I started going, I don't know. And then I started kind of going rogue, and I was thinking about near-death experiences, and, you hear stories about near-death experiences, whether or not I even believe these things, I don't know. But then I started thinking, like, why is it that every time you hear someone's near-death experience, that it seems to be a near-death experience that aligns with like Christianity, or like, God and Jesus Christ as it is described in Christianity? I was like, do Muslims not have near-death experiences? And so I was researching that, and it was actually, they were like, no, someone actually did a study on just that, because other people had noticed that it seemed that many near-death experiences were only from the Christian perspective. And they found 19 Muslim people who had near-death experiences that were aligned with their Muslim religion. Because me, just from an outside perspective, I was like, well, maybe, and this would make the most sense to me, maybe when we die, whatever we believed here in our mortal life on earth is what we are shown, So I'm going to be shown a bunch of naked women dancing in a circle around a fire if I'm, practicing Wicca. And if you're a Christian, you're going to be greeted by Jesus Christ, or if you're Muslim, you'll be greeted by Allah. Like, so, and that actually does seem to be the consensus if we are, treating near-death experiences as real things. The kind of elements of them were all the same, but, the characters, for lack of a better word, that people were seeing align with their religion. which makes sense to me. And if I'm going to believe anything, it's like, I don't think any religion is right or wrong. They're too freaking similar. If religion, if there is a higher power, I kind of think it's like we're all right, which makes it even crazier that we're constantly fighting with each other. And near-death experience research does back that up. So anyway, that's just like the road, the kind of road that I went down. This is just a normal Tuesday afternoon for me, where I just go on that and I look up things and I research things. But anyway, back to Americans United for a separation of church and state, and just how, I'm uneasy with any, religion in politics, and how it seems like there's always religion in politics. The thoughts on that, and this is, I don't know if this was on record or off record, but basically, what people from the organization were saying is like, yes, you are not wrong that, like, Zohar Mamdani is also bleeding religion into politics, but it is so minor compared to the infractions of the Trump administration, which 100%, obviously, they are going full Christianity, crazy, cuckoo. We'll get into JD Vance and demons in just a moment. But they also did point out that my fears were not unwarranted, and that what Zoran doing is, and I quote, a slippery slope. So it just made me feel better, because I just wanted to like have a clear line, like, where is the line drawn? We didn't have enough time to talk about like what is the actual line, like where is it? I don't understand where it is. Again, we have more intersection of church and state later in this episode, because we have the Pope condemning Pete Hegseth, and it's like, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? I don't know what we're doing here, but this is how we live now. So a little bit about the No Kings protest. This is from The Guardian. I like this because it had a bit of history about protesting and demonstrating as a whole that I found interesting. So it said, so you went to a No Kings protest. Now what? Millions of people marched on Saturday against Trump and his administration. While the single-day protest has ended, there are other ways used in other movements throughout history to keep the momentum going. All right. More than 8 million people showed up across 3,300 No Kings protests on Saturday, calling for an end to the war in Iran, immigration agents in their communities, and what they see as Trump's creeping authoritarianism. I mean, it's more than creeping at this point. Organizers say it's the greatest number of protests in a single day in U.S. history. But movement scholars say social change doesn't begin and end with one protest. It takes activism at the local and national level and in a variety of forms to bring about change. No Kings was conceived to unite a cross-movement push against authoritarianism, and there is not one way to fight it, said Leah Greenberg, a co-executive director of the Indivisible Project, which founded the No Kings movement. We see No Kings as part of a tapestry of defiance that is going on. In the past year, Americans have demanded change through a variety of actions. When Donald Trump sent federal agents into Los Angeles and Chicago, people rallied in the streets and called for ICE out. When consumers wanted to express disapproval of corporations' ties to Trump, they initiated boycotts of Target, Tesla, and Amazon. When students were upset at the presence of ICE agents in their schools and communities, they organized walkouts. Protests build power by garnering attention and pulling people off the sidelines into action, said Hari Han, a political scientist at Johns Hopkins University and the author of Prisms of the People, Power and Organizing in 21st Century America. And if we look historically and across different movements, change is often a combination of people taking action through a variety of means and then leaders negotiating for power given the actions that people have taken. Han pointed to activists in Minnesota who were able to pass a raft of progressive and pro-labor laws in 2023, paid family and medical leave and driver's licenses for undocumented residents, among others, as an example of successful movement building by organizing with multiracial coalitions, strategizing with legislators, and negotiating proposed legislation. It's one of the most generous social safety nets in the country, and organizers were able to put grassroots energy together with institutional politics, said Han. No Kings' success, organizers say, will be defined by whether attenders have signed up to organize in their communities and follow through on other actions like Know Your Rights trainings and mutual aid. And what I will say was different about this No Kings protest was at the end of it, instead of everyone just talking about where they were going to go to brunch, there were actually volunteers who were handing out little slips of paper with actionable next steps that you could partake in. And I thought that was great, although you're going to need more than to hand people a piece of paper. Because let me tell you, after 2 hours of marching, the average person is going to feel very accomplished. I did actually take on a next step personally. I met up, I was marching with Americans United for Separation of Church and State, but then afterwards I met up with Disrupt, and I went out and I talked to people about the Epstein egg hunt, and then I am going to go out and do that on Saturday. So that is my next step, just as an example. Your next step can be literally anything as long as you take one. What we think is actually important are the ways in which these large-scale gatherings fuel ongoing organizing that might look like economic non-cooperation, local mutual aid organizing, or legislative advocacy at the state or local level, said Greenberg. It's all connected if we do it right. Here's a look at how these efforts have worked over time. Protest. Some of the earliest protests in America include covert and overt acts that enslaved people took to object to bondage, including working slowly in the fields. And, this is very reminiscent of people saying sign up for ICE and do a really bad job in the office, right? Breaking or misplacing tools, setting fires, or running away. Enslaved people also attempted to free themselves by organizing armed rebellions and revolts. Occupation has historically been another effective form of protest. Throughout the 1900s, Indigenous Americans protested U.S. treaty violations by occupying Alcatraz Island, Mount Rushmore, and the Bureau of Indian Affairs building to demand land back. But probably the most recognizable form of protest is the one in the streets, immortalized in the marches, freedom rides, and sit-ins of the civil rights movement for social justice and equal rights in the 1950s and 1960s. Over the past 10 years, numerous mass protests have swept through the country, including March for Our Lives in 2018 to demand stricter gun control measures, the Black Lives Matter protests triggered by the police killing of George Floyd in 2020, and the No Kings protest against the Trump administration last October. In 2025, the first year of Trump's second term, more people protested in the streets than in 2017, the first year of his first term, according to data from the open source project Crowd Counting Consortium. The amount of people protesting is record-breaking, said Hunter Dunn, an organizer with the grassroots organization 50501, which co-founded No Kings. There was also enthusiasm, who followed me on Instagram this week. That was my big win on social media this week, which co-founded No Kings. There's also enthusiasm for using protests as a launchpad to get people involved in local organizing, whether it's election defense with the midterms coming up, or immigrants' rights organizing against AI data centers. During rallies, people often gather at parks, on streets, and other public locations to bring attention to a cause. And when I'm reading this, I'm also thinking about our lack of community, which we talk about so often, not just here, but on GWF, because it affects how we date. Our lack of community is also going to then obviously, affect how we protest, right? If we can't get together, if we can't come together in person, because of a lack of community, because we are, crippled by our devices, that is also going to affect us getting out. So it's even more impressive in this age of being, not being in person, that we were able to get the most amount of people ever in a single day demonstration out on the streets. I think that's really impressive. But our lack of community really ties into how frequently we're going to be getting out on the streets. Someone was trying to talk to me about organizing, something. And I was like, the biggest challenge you're going to have is actually getting people physically out. It is harder and harder these days. A street protest or march can also culminate in a rally where participants take turns speaking, performing music, or leafletting attendees to share goals and literature about the cause. I mean, don't even get me started on the left and sharing goals, because we need to frickin' decide on a few and then share them. There's always 18,000 causes that we're out for. We need to pick one. Let's get one done, And again, anytime I say that, everyone will prove my point by fighting about it. Much like rally, march, and parade are also terms used interchangeably with protest. In 1913, suffragists held the women's suffrage parade to draw attention to how women could vote in only 9 states. In 2017, activists held the first women's march the day after Trump's first inauguration, protesting his rhetoric and platform as misogynistic and an overall threat to women. Activists and scholars have credited the march with driving the Me Too movement and a record number of women to participate in the 2018 midterm elections. There was something special and different when people said #MeToo, Fatima Goss Graves, president and CEO of the National Women's Law Center, told The Guardian. We had worked on issues related to harassment and gender-based violence over many decades, but the Me Too movement really gave people a framework to speak out and name their experiences. Labor unions have a rich history of protest in the U.S., particularly in the form of a strike or a work stoppage in which workers demand better conditions, including healthcare benefits, on-the-job safety protections, and higher wages. A general strike is much larger. It's when a sizable portion of the workforce in a certain town or region stops working to bring about economic or social change. The first general strike in North America was in 1835 in Philadelphia, where 20,000 workers across 40 sectors demanded a 10-hour workday and fairer wages. In the end, they won, incorporating rallies, parades, and newspaper campaigns to secure 10-hour workdays for skilled and unskilled workers in the city, and became the catalyst of labor organizing in the U.S. After federal immigration agents killed Minneapolis residents Renee Good and Alex Pretty this January, organizers called for a national general strike of no school, no work, and no shopping to protest the presence and brutality of federal agents in the city. Thousands in Minnesota participated in protests, hundreds of businesses closed, and work stoppage occurred across a variety of sectors backed by labor unions. Those of us in the trade union movement understand the leverage and power that our labor has, and we are going to try and use that because really there's nothing else left. Kieran Knutson, the president of Communications Workers of America, CWA, Local 7250 in Minneapolis, told The Guardian in January. Boycott and divestment. Boycotts of corporations have historically involved a refusal to purchase their products or engage with their services with the hope that punitive pressure can change attitudes and behaviors. Alternatively, a pro-cot involves shifting resources to entities that people want to support, such as small businesses, as they suspend support for others. In the 1930s, Black Americans led Don't Buy Where You Can't Work campaigns in northern cities to advocate for Black jobs at white-owned businesses in Black neighborhoods. The boycotts and picketing in which protesters stood outside of businesses and held signs created jobs for Black workers during the Depression. Divestments are a related form of protest. In 1985, UC Berkeley students demanded the university divest from South Africa in protest against apartheid. Students led rallies, teach-ins, and encampments to pressure the university. A year later, the University of California Board of Regents voted to divest $3 billion from companies with ties to South Africa. So very similar to what modern day university students are trying to do with Israel. In 2025, Americans' boycott of Target, this was one of the most successful ones we've seen recently, after the company rolled back its diversity, equity, and inclusion DEI efforts, had an impact. Target acknowledged the boycott was one of the reasons sales were down last year. We are reclaiming our power, Latasha Brown, co-founder of Black Voters Matter, told The Guardian during a Black Friday boycott the group helped spearhead last year. We are redirecting our spending and we are resisting this rise to authoritarianism. Under an ethos of solidarity, mutual aid involves a network of volunteers gathering resources, food, housing assistance, and childcare to support the needs of people in their communities. In response to the HIV/AIDS crisis of the 1980s, LGBTQ plus groups across the country developed care networks to support vulnerable community members. Again, very similar to what we're seeing with immigrants, right? During the coronavirus pandemic, local organizations across the country stepped up to help low-income families, frontline workers, and immunocompromised people through grocery delivery programs. One such aid program in Brooklyn, New York, supported 28,000 people with groceries between March 2020 and June 2021. During Operation Metro Surge in Minneapolis in January, in which 3,000 ICE agents killed 2 Minneapolis residents and arrested hundreds, mutual aid networks were vital for distributing food, money, and diapers to immigrant families sheltering in place out of fear of being stopped by ICE. Brittany Kubricki, a Minneapolis resident, told The Guardian earlier this year that she was organizing donations, grocery deliveries, and school pickups from her dining room table. I haven't ever really done something like this before, she said. This is just something I tried, and it happens to be working. Walkout. When students and employees walk out of schools or workplaces, Greta Thunberg did a lot of these for climate change, to express their disapproval over a certain issue. The idea is to do so in numbers. The more people who participate, the more impactful the message. In 1968, 15,000 students walked out en masse as part of the East Los Angeles walkouts to protest disparities in educational outcomes between white American and Mexican American students. After the walkout, students submitted demands to the Los Angeles Board of Education to improve the bilingual education curriculum, among other issues. Even though police arrested organizers and the board rejected their demands, the walkout was one of the largest student protests in history. Walkouts remain a viable protest tactic for young people today, including to voice their grievances against ICE. This was our way to make our voices heard, Lark Jeffers told The Guardian after participating in the Free America walkout on January 20th in Silver Spring, Maryland. Because at the end of the day, we're 16. What we say isn't going to make the lawmakers listen to us. Teach in. This longtime form of protest is about sharing knowledge. Activists and protest leaders spend time lecturing people in the movement about their causes, often opening debate and discussion as a means of raising awareness and spurring further action. Teach-ins were popularized during the Vietnam War when students used them to discuss the war draft and strategies to curtail the U.S. government's involvement abroad. The first teach-in, which included lectures, debates, and films, took place at the University of Michigan in 1965 and was attended by 3,500 students and supporting faculty members. The teach-in boosted the national anti-war movement and inspired other campuses to protest and hold teach-ins of their own. Teach-ins once again became popular on U.S. college campuses in 2024 as Israel bombed the Gaza Strip following Hamas's attack. The teach-ins, often in student encampments, educated participants about the long fight for Palestinian freedom and the boycott, divestment, sanctions, the BDS movement that seeks to isolate Israel economically, politically, and culturally over its oppression of Palestinians. And so again, I really like this because it wasn't just like, hey, this is what happened. This was a huge thing. Everyone back to their places. This was like, it showed historically what things worked, where the inspiration for some of these tactics may have come from. And moving forward, what we can all do as people who, hopefully want to see a better country. And then I'm not going to read this whole article, but the New York Times also regarding the No Kings did a 5 takeaways kind of piece, and it says 5 takeaways from No Kings rallies as the midterms heat up. The war in Iran was a galvanizing force, but plenty of protesters focused on President Trump's immigration crackdown. Senate candidates in several key races joined the crowds. And so the 5 key takeaways is, number 1, the war in Iran seemed to really galvanize younger voters to get out. 2, Trump's immigration crackdown remains a focus. There was dueling protests that unfolded near Mar-a-Lago. The midterm candidates came out in force, which, obviously anytime I was laughing because every couple of blocks we would just see posters for Dan Goldman for Congress or whatever it is. That's the person who's running for Congress. That's the incumbent in my district who is being challenged by Brad Lander. Brad Lander actually, surprisingly, and I only say surprisingly because on just a larger level as far as the mayoral race, Brad Lander just doesn't have the je ne sais quoi. He doesn't have the X factor, but I do think he's a good and smart leader in many ways, even though he hates me and runs away from me anytime that he sees me. But that's just because I ran against him, and I'm sure he was like, well, another young person with a headache. But young for politics. But he actually is polling quite well. And again, this aligns with what I've been talking about for the past few weeks about when you're running for a smaller local office, whether it be city council or even Congress, I am considering, even though it is a national position, you are still representing a smaller local group of people. And that is when someone like a Brad Lander is really going to flourish. Someone who has connections on the ground in his community, right? But he does not have that larger level star power like Zoran Mamdani that you need to run a larger seat like mayor of New York City. Congress can go back and forth, we'll say, but that was really something that was telling to me when I did some research and talked to some people and found out that surprisingly Brad Lander is actually crushing Dan Goldman in the polls right now for Congress, which is something that I wouldn't have expected. Again, because Dan Goldman, I don't even know if he actually is younger. He certainly looks younger, flashier, has a lot of that, has a lot of money. But, the reason that they want him out is because he has all these AIPAC ties. And Brad Lander is a really good person to go against him because, he is Jewish, but he's a Jewish person who is anti-AIPAC, so a comfortable choice for Jewish voters in the district. And it's a district in Manhattan, so obviously I'm guessing a lot of Jewish people in the area. Again, it's my neighborhood. I don't find the East Village to be particularly Jewish, but it is Manhattan, so. All right. So midterm candidates came out in force was another one. And then Democrats found fresh fuel for their No Kings slogan. That's just 2 days before the protest, the Treasury Department said that it would begin printing dollars with Mr. Trump's signature on them, a first for a sitting U.S. president. So they're just saying that's aligned with obviously a monarchy. So that's just the New York Times takeaway. But I thought the Guardian did a better job of just not just telling us what happened, but telling us what to do next. And here again, let's learn from history. A lot of history in this week's episode, which is kind of my favorite. All right. And then the last of the main stories is going to be about the Pope and Pete Hegseth. And then we'll see what we can get into to close it out from Girl. Again, I knew I had more than I could get to this week, but I want to make sure that we at least get to the things that I think are most pressing, although there are so many. All right. So this is actually from People's World. I don't think I've ever used this before, but it's peoplesworld.org. I did look it up to make sure it's legitimate. It was founded in 1924, and it says continuing the daily worker. So it seems very much like a blue collar, a working class news source. And we'll add this to my list of news sources. And this is by John Wojcik from yesterday. Pope rebukes Hegseth's prayers, labeling them as bloodlust. Pope Leo II launched the beginning of the holiest week on the Christian calendar with what is seen worldwide as a sharp attack on U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and the right-wing Christian nationalist movement he is pushing. The Pope said God refuses...
Secretary of War.
Wait, what did I say?
In the article, it says Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Pete Hegseth is the Secretary of War.
Oh, okay, got it. His remarks were seen as a sharp condemnation. Wait. Well, sorry. The Pope said God refuses the prayers of leaders who have hands full of blood. That's very important. The Pope said God refuses the prayers of leaders who have hands full of blood, which I would push back and say, most leaders, definitely every American president. His remarks were seen as a sharp condemnation of Hegseth and a variety of other U.S. lawmakers and Christian nationalist leaders who use religious invocations to claim that the war on Iran is America doing the work of God. This is our God, Jesus, King of Peace, who rejects war, whom no one can use to justify war, Leo said to thousands of people attending his Palm Sunday Mass at St. Peter's Square. He does not listen to the prayers of those who wage war, but rejects them. The Pope demanded an end to all military airstrikes on Iran. The bombings have been carried out for weeks by the Trump and Netanyahu regimes in the U.S. and Israel. And then here on the flip side, right, just as much as we talk about separation of church and state, it's interesting because so often we see these prominent, religious figures talking about politics, and it's I don't know. I always thought it was weird, in church when they would bring up political things, I guess. I know, and obviously I'm someone who believes that politics is in everything, or everything is political, but like I guess I feel like maybe you don't need to like people can use their own constructive or their own critical thinking when they're listening to a sermon or whatever it is you're listening to in your religious your place of worship, and then apply that the teachings of your religious leader to what is happening. But I guess we don't have the critical thinking to do that anymore, so our religious leaders have to outright tell us what is wrong, I'm guessing. So the Pope demanded an end to all military airstrikes on Iran. The bombings have been carried out for weeks by the Trump and Netanyahu regimes in the US and Israel. Thousands of innocent people have been killed, and many others have been forced to abandon their homes, Pope Leo said. I renew my prayerful closeness to all those who have lost their loved ones in the attacks that have struck schools, hospitals, and residential areas. The Pope's Palm Sunday remarks directly challenged what Hegseth said just 4 days earlier. The defense secretary, I'm sorry. So the Secretary of War is what. Are you saying that because they changed the name of it?
Yeah,
I get it. I get it. Okay. I offered his prayer, so it's not inaccurate. It's just like when we're calling it, instead of calling it like the Gulf of Mexico, calling it the Gulf of America, that kind of a thing.
Oh,
is
yeah,
that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll continue reading it as written. The defense secretary offered his prayers at the Pentagon. Hegseth called on his listeners to pray that God will support the mission of U.S. troops to rain violence and death on the enemy. So I guess like in this instance, I understand why Pope Leo, felt the need to step in because, he is the largest religious leader basically for Catholicism, and he is like must be pulling his hair out. I don't know if he has hair, I gotta check out a picture, but pulling his whatever out, pulling his eyebrows out as people are like bastardizing God and religion for their own wars that they are saying are religious but obviously aren't. He also asked God to guide American bullets straight into the bodies of their opponents, saying, "Let every round find its mark against the enemies of righteousness and our great nation." Oh, Jesus Christ. Oh, Jesus Christ, literally. He prayed, "We ask these things in bold confidence in the mighty and powerful name of Jesus Christ." Hegseth has previously organized prayer meetings at the Pentagon, which also call upon God to aid the U.S. war effort in Iran and elsewhere. Christian nationalist supporters of these actions have gone so far as to claim that U.S. wars are part of God's plan to bring on the apocalypse, after which Christ will descend upon the earth and judge everyone, condemning all non-believers to hell. Hegseth has several tattoos featuring imagery associated with Christian nationalism, including a Jerusalem cross on his chest. That cross was carried by medieval European crusaders who set out to kill followers of the Muslim religion. Nice. Christian nationalists inject their racist views into U.S. politics wherever they can in an effort to move the political agenda to the right, critics charge. Americans United for Separation of Church and State has filed a lawsuit over Hegseth's latest remark and similar religious meetings hosted by Labor Secretary Lori Chavez de Remer. The group said the two officials abused the power of their government. Did you want me to read that, Mike? You put it up too fast. The group said the two officials... I
pulled it down. We'll get to it after you're done reading.
The group said the two officials abused the power of their government positions and taxpayer-funded resources to impose their preferred religion on federal workers. Reverend Primo Racimo, an Episcopal church pastor at St. Margaret's Church on the south side of Chicago, the hometown of the Pope, said it is encouraging and invaluable to have someone from our city who has risen to such a high position in the church take positions that are in the interest of all the people of the world. He said the Pope follows a just tradition in the church. Father Primo mentioned St. Margaret of Scotland, the patron saint of his church. He noted that during her reign, her husband, the king, went off on the crusades against Islam. While he was gone, Margaret opened the country's jails, freeing those imprisoned for political and religious beliefs. Yes, Michael. And there was a comment from someone who was viewing it. So George says the Washington Post still calls him Secretary of Defense because Congress has not approved this change. It's also why they continue to use the Gulf of Mexico. Yeah, basically anything that is a Trump change, I just don't follow. But just so we're all on the same page, that is the same role. Sometimes I even like he's making changes so willy-nilly I forget what he is even doing. I can't keep up, you know? All right. So I thought that was I thought that was interesting. Kind of kind of a God watch, kind of but also I think a main story, just because of how much they are trying to make violence like a politically charged in this administration. Um, all right, we had some interesting things, but yeah, I want to wrap this up sooner rather than later. Okay, so really quick, I have an update from the Colorado conversion therapy ban. This just came in from Politico this week. It was yesterday, I think. So the Supreme Court strikes down conversion therapy ban. The justices did rule 8-1 that the First Amendment prohibits states from using their licensing power to prevent therapists and other professionals from sharing particular views with patients. States can't ban so-called conversion therapy aimed at changing a minor's sexual orientation or gender identity, the Supreme Court has ruled. And it is, I mean, it's banned in New York currently. I looked it up because I had an idea, the justices ruled 8-1 Tuesday that the First Amendment prohibits states from using their licensing power to limit the topics therapists and other professionals can discuss with their clients. The First Amendment stands as a shield against any effort to enforce orthodoxy in thought or speech in this country. Justice Neil Gorsuch wrote for the court's majority. The ruling is a win for the Trump administration, which urged the court to declare that Colorado's ban violates free speech rights, which is interesting, to me, because I don't think that what a therapist says to their patient is free speech. It's a medical setting. But anyway, they got it. The case, Chiles versus Salazar, was brought by Kaylee Chiles, a licensed counselor, and we went over this, who described herself as a practicing Christian who sometimes provides counseling informed by her faith. Which is not new. I don't think it should be fucking legal to do. Again, separation of health, of church and health, I think also should be it, whether it be, physical health. I told that story about how when I was, looking up different things for like, egg freezing, how there was a woman who was highly rated in New York, but then she also had been doing this like crazy Christian advocacy work. And I'm like, hell to the no. Chiles said that she wished to offer talk therapy to minors who want to reduce feelings of same-sex attraction or feel more comfortable in their bodies. Chiles isn't licensed to prescribe medicine or perform surgery, thank God. So the ruling does not directly impact states' power to regulate those sorts of interventions. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson was the sole dissenter, God bless her. She said the court was unwisely interfering in the long tradition of states regulating the practice of medicine and similar professions. Chiles is not speaking in the ether. She is providing therapy to minors as a licensed healthcare professional, Jackson wrote. She declared that conversion therapy is dangerous and said the court's decision opens a dangerous can of worms. It threatens to impair states' ability to regulate the provision of medical care in any respect. It extends the Constitution into uncharted territory in an utterly irrational fashion, and it ultimately risks grave harms to Americans' health and well-being, she added, reading portions of her dissent from the bench in a sign of deep disagreement. But Gorsuch, citing the fact that major medical groups once considered homosexuality an illness, I mean, they are going back, countered that leaving medical professionals' speech unprotected would stifle progress. I mean, the only people who are stifling progress are you guys. Medical consensus, too, is not static. It evolves and always has. A prevailing standard of care may reflect what most practitioners believe today, but it cannot mark the outer boundary of what they may say tomorrow, he wrote. Justice Elena Kagan, joined by Justice Sonia Sotomayor, concurred with the court's consecutive block, but added in a separate opinion that a complete ban on therapy aimed at a person's sexual orientation or gender identity might be lawful. Kagan said that the key flaw in Colorado's law was that it allowed some such counseling while prohibiting other professional approaches. Kagan also repeated a point she made during oral argument in the case. upholding Colorado's ban might bless efforts by conservative states to prohibit talk therapy aimed at affirming patients' gender identity. It does not matter what the state's preferred side is, she wrote. In a 6-3 decision last year in a case from Tennessee, the Supreme Court broadly upheld the power of states to ban doctors from prescribing hormone therapy or puberty inhibitors as part of gender-affirming care. A related ban on surgery for transgender minors was not challenged in the case. The new ruling is the Supreme Court's most recent foray into transgender-related issues, but won't be the last. The justices heard arguments in January in a pair of cases relating to states' efforts to ban transgender girls from competing on girls' sports teams. Rulings on those cases are expected by late June. Yeah, I'm just like, the conversion therapy and how they got that under free speech is very interesting to me. We really can use free speech to mean whatever we want it to mean, apparently. Real quickly, there's been a lot of talk. This is more of an online-y story, but I do think it is certainly worth discussing on this show. Is about the bullet used to blow Charlie Kirk's neck out. George says, it scares me that if you watch the space launch, he will demand a rename to the Trump Kennedy Space Center. I'm sure. Does the bullet match? Key issue emerges in Charlie Kirk murder case. This is from USA Today by Nadia Yancey Bragg. Defense attorneys say law enforcement has not linked a bullet found during Charlie Kirk's autopsy to the rifle allegedly used in the shooting. Attorneys for the man accused of shooting conservative activist Charlie Kirk said a federal law enforcement agency did not connect the bullet found during autopsy to the suspected murder weapon. Tyler Robinson has been charged with aggravated murder and other felonies in Kirk's death. Kirk, 31, was killed September 10th while speaking to students at Utah Valley University in Orem, Utah. Authorities had said the gun used to assassinate Kirk was a Mauser 98, a common bolt-action rifle typically used for hunting. The hunting rifle, which had a heavier .30-06 caliber, dates back...
30-06.
What?
That's called a 30-06.
I was just about to say, sorry if I said that wrong. 30-aught? Like, how are we spelling that?
Like, the early aughts.
Aughts, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so it's 06, but instead of saying like .30, it's a 30-06.
30-06 caliber dates back decades as German-made military surplus with millions produced and resold in the United States, experts told USA Today. Officials recovered the weapon near the scene of the shooting with one spent cartridge in the chamber and 3 unfired bullets etched with meme-influenced messages. Robinson's attorneys said in a court filing that they have received a summary report from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, which indicates that the ATF was unable to identify the bullet recovered at autopsy to the rifle allegedly tied to Mr. Robinson. Although the state... Yes.
When did they add explosives to the ATF's purview?
I don't know. Look it up.
I remember it just being the ATF. I don't remember explosives being part of
it. I don't know. That's not something that I would know off the top of my head, but you can look it up. Although the state has not indicated an intent to produce this report at the preliminary hearing, the defense may very well decide to offer the testimony of the ATF firearm analyst as exculpatory evidence, the court filing said. Robinson's attorney said the FBI is conducting a second comparative bullet analysis and a bullet lead analysis, but it was not yet complete. The defense asked Judge Tony Graff to delay the preliminary hearing scheduled for May, in part because the team has not gotten the case files and protocols related to these analyses and other evidence from prosecutors. The defense did, however, receive a hard drive with more than 600,000 files in a meeting March 12th with prosecutors, according to the court filing. That came on top of the 20,000 files the defense team had already received, which included 31 hours of audio and more than 700 hours of video. Robinson's attorneys said it would take at least 60 days to review the evidence that they have and determine whether or not whether more has not yet been turned over to them. The defense team has devoted and will continue to devote significant resources to processing discovery, including identifying materials not yet received to inform readiness for the preliminary hearing, the court filing said. However, the defense team is realistic, and the comprehensive review required to determine what is missing will take hundreds of hours. When asked about the defense's characterization of the ATF report, Christopher D. Ballard, a spokesperson for the Utah County Attorney's Office, told USA Today ethical rules prohibit him from speaking publicly about forensic testing and test results. But I can say generally that when the results of a bullet fragment analysis come back as inconclusive, that means only that the fragment did not contain enough detail for the examiner to determine. It doesn't mean no. It means we're not sure whether the characteristics of the on the fragment were consistent with having been fired by a particular firearm, Ballard said. Because if we're going to go into conspiracy or theory, and this is done by the U.S. government or something, surely they would have had to been prepared for this kind of forensic work to have been done. Ballard confirmed the FBI and ATF are adding information to the initial reports, which prosecutors expect will include data supporting the initial conclusions. As soon as the state receives those supplemental reports, we will provide them to the defense, he said. Utah County Attorney Jeff Gray has said he will seek the death penalty for Robinson. Robinson is set to return to court April 17th for hearing on a defense motion to ban cameras from the courtroom. All right. And it's the one time when I feel like there maybe should be cameras in the courtroom. Oh, we're going to try and ban them from the courtroom. Cool. Great. All right. So that was one that we definitely wanted to do. And then
it was after 9/11. That was in the sweeping part of the
explosives were added.
Yeah, they took it out of the Judiciary Committee and they put it under the Department of Defense, I think. But that was right after 9/11, and they were like, oh, by the way, you're also in charge of explosives.
Yeah.
So get on that.
Oh, we forgot about explosives. Look how bad they are.
Oh no. What have we done?
That's their DEI, including explosives. All right. So this one is very interesting. I saw Reshma, who is the head of Girls Who Code, post about this, and I had it on the docket. And then George, Wacko George, I know you also submitted this. Very interesting story from yesterday out of the Washington Post. Trump administration lawsuit says a woman's retreat is discrimination. The lawsuit against the Coca-Cola distributor signals a historic shift for the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which enforces federal law on workplace bias. This is by Joanna Slater. As company networking events go, it was unremarkable. And also, just speaking of company events, this has nothing to do with the news, but for you guys who watched the TV show Jury Duty, or if you're not familiar with it, watch Jury Duty and then also watch Company Retreat. It's so funny. The premise is the whole thing is made up. Everyone's actors and they're going on a company retreat, but one person is a real person and he is just put into this world, kind of like Truman Show-esque. So funny. I love it. As a company networking events go, it was unremarkable. About 250 female employees of a Coca-Cola distributor gathered inside the ballroom of a Connecticut casino for a day of speakers and team building exercises, preceded the night before by cocktails and dinner. The theme, embrace your authenticity. It was gonna be corny as hell. That's my I love a women's event, but it's gonna be corny as hell. The event, held in late 2024, offered the women a chance to mingle with higher ups and bond over their shared challenges in a male-dominated workplace, said one participant. It was fun, energizing, and useful, she said. According to a news lawsuit from the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, it was also illegal. Dun dun dun. Last month, the EEOC sued Coca-Cola Beverages Northeast, the Japanese-owned bottler that distributes. Wait, am I missing something? Wasn't Coca-Cola a big contributor to Trump? I'm pretty sure it was, because didn't they give some Diet Coke thing to Trump? Am I making this? I'm pretty sure this is accurate. And I was like, I can't even see this because I can't stop drinking Diet Coke. I can't give this up. I'm pretty sure. The Japanese-owned bottler that distributes soda in the region, saying the women's event was a form of unlawful discrimination against male employees under federal civil rights law. The agency is seeking unspecified compensatory and punitive damages. It's the first EEOC lawsuit filed over a corporate diversity, equity, and inclusion program, part of a sweeping effort by the Trump administration to stamp out what it describes as illegal discrimination. But more such cases could be imminent. In December, a month after Trump designated her EEOC chair, Andrea Lucas issued an unusual public appeal asking white men who feel they have experienced discrimination. Oh my God, Tyler Fisher, where are you? At work to contact the agency as soon as possible. In February, she said women-only networking events would create new girls club. He's not, though. Women
What are
only.
you talking about? There's girls on 6th Street he could be harassing.
Sorry if you guys don't know what we're talking about. It's Comedy Insider, but he's like a pretty known comedian, so look it up. Fisher spelled the wrong way, aka not like me. She said women-only networking events would create new girls clubs that operate like the old boys clubs before them, likening them to racially segregated employee social events of the 1970s. The agency is already investigating footwear giant Nike and financial services firm Northwestern Mutual over their corporate diversity initiatives. Alfred doesn't like that. You don't like when women are not getting treated equally, or I guess, or do you not like women's retreats? No, you love them. You marched in the Women's March. Peter Bennett, a lawyer representing Coca-Cola Beverages Northeast, said in a statement that the 2024 event fully complied with existing EEOC regulation, and the company found it disappointing that the EEOC did not conduct a full investigation. A spokesperson for the EEOC declined to respond to questions about the case, saying the agency does not comment on ongoing litigation. For experts, the case is emblematic of the way conservatives have dramatically shifted the terrain on questions of diversity and affirmative action in recent years. Now, corporate programs with relatively small stakes like this one could spark legal action, said Katie Iyer, a law professor at Rutgers University. 5 years ago, people would have said there is no legal risk to the Coca-Cola bottler in organizing this event, Iyer said, but most people would not say that today. So it's like, that's always a step one. Like, before they even do anything legal, they just scare you out of doing it because, like, most times the company's not even going to want to put up with this, right? It's also a sea change for the EEOC, a 62-year-old agency that enforces federal law on bias and harassment in the workplace. The EEOC's priority has never been bringing lawsuits on behalf of white males in reverse discrimination situations, said Gerald Mattman, an employment law expert and partner at the law firm Duane Morris. Instead, the agency operated as the guardian of vulnerable workers who wouldn't be able to pursue such claims on their own. Mattman said he receives nearly daily calls from executives who want to help various groups of people in their company succeed, but also don't want to get sued. He tells clients that any mentoring or managerial training program must be open to anyone and offer an equal opportunity to participate. The advice at this point is the world has changed, Mattman said. Founded in 1977 and headquartered in New Hampshire, Coca-Cola Beverages Northeast employs 3,400 people who bottle, pack, deliver, and sell Coke products across the region from Boston to upstate New York. More than 85% of those employees are men. So back in 2024, the company decided to hold its first in-person women's forum. Before the event, Bennett said the company notified its 11 unions asking whether they had any objections. None did. At the event, the attendees heard from women executives who described their career paths and watched a demonstration by a trainer of service dogs sponsored by the company. Sitting at round tables in a ballroom, they talked with colleagues around the region about strategies for dealing with business scenarios and about the specific issues they face as women. Being a woman is kind of tough in the industry, said the participant, who spoke on the condition of anonymity because she was not authorized to speak to the media. Sometimes you have different hurdles than men do. Until very recently, she said she was the only woman in her role at a regional office. That must have been fun. After the September 2024 event, a male production employee of the company filed a formal complaint with the EEOC, inspired by Andrew Tate. Now I added that part in. Nearly 4 months passed. Then in mid-January 2025, toward the end of the transition to the Trump administration, the EEOC issued a letter saying it had found reasonable cause to believe that the company had violated federal civil rights law, at which point the two parties began talks on a potential settlement. Those negotiations broke down in August 2025, the agent's lawsuit says. Over those months, the agency's lawsuit says, over those months, the Trump administration deployed every available tool to advance its own civil rights agenda, one in which diversity programs were anathema. President Donald Trump quickly signed executive orders aimed at dismantling DEI efforts, including rescinding a 1965 order put in place by President Lyndon B. Johnson that required federal contractors to develop affirmative action plans. In a break with precedent, Trump also fired 2 Democratic EEOC commissioners days after he was sworn in. Experts say the EEOC receives tens of thousands of discrimination complaints each year, but investigates only a fraction of those cases because of limited resources. Even fewer, perhaps a couple hundred annually, become the subject of lawsuits. Usually those cases involve instances of substantial workplace harm, said Jenny Yang, a former chair of the EEOC and partner at Outen and Golden, such as pay disparities and harassment, not a single networking event as in the Coca-Cola distributor case. There has been a sustained effort to locate a DEI-focused challenge for at least a year, Yang said. It's telling us they didn't have a stronger case to file. The Coca-Cola distributor has yet to respond in court to the EEOC lawsuit. A 2023 Supreme Court decision lowered the threshold for the harms that workers must demonstrate in employment cases, which could bolster the agency's case. The government is relying on the language of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which prohibits employers from discriminating against individuals on their compensation, terms, conditions, or privileges of employment based on sex, race, religion, or national origin. That statute was passed with the intent to remedy existing forms of discrimination, said Victoria Lipnick, a former EEOC acting chair and partner at Resolution Economics. And for decades, corporate America devised programs to promote equal opportunity for disadvantaged groups. But now such programs are bumping up against the neutral language of the statute, Lipnick said, which is why you got to be so specific when you're writing out legislation. Because, a lot of times people just assume everyone's going to do it, oh, we're going to move forward like in good faith is what you would call it, at least in like the entertainment business. Sometimes like a deal is made in good faith, meaning like we're not going to write down every little tiny like detail of this. We're doing this in good faith, but there's a risk involved, right? You okay, Alfred? The employee who attended the 2024 event wasn't aware it had triggered a lawsuit. She said she thought it should happen every year. She still uses some of the lessons she gleaned there in her work. She said, including strategies for remaining calm when dealing with an irate customer. Everyone could just kind of be free and talk about their struggles. She said it's very empowering for women to get in the same room. And I do just want to go real quick to Reshma's Instagram, because she said a little bit more about it, and I do really love her, Reshma Sojani. She founded Girls Who Code, and she also is the CEO and founder of Moms First US. More recently, she's been doing a lot of work with getting a universal childcare and stuff in New York. That's something that she's been really working hard on. And where the hell? No, I feel like she just posted this. Where is this? Oh, here. Wow, she posted a lot in the past 24 hours. Anyway, okay, so she writes, there is something deeply dangerous about telling women they cannot come together to talk about their experiences at work. What worries me just as much is how normalized this is starting to feel. At what point does this stop being something we shrug off? If your workplace is starting to phase out women's initiatives, what is preventing you from saying something? Let's get some of the facts straight. A company in which more than 85% of the employees are men held a women's networking event in 2024. The Trump administration's Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, an agency historically tasked with protecting vulnerable workers from bias and harassment in the workplace, is suing. The federal government is claiming that same women's event unlawfully discriminated against the more than 85% of men who make up the company. This is the playbook. Con men into thinking all of their problems are because of women. Or if you're a white guy, all of your problems are because of women or people of color or immigrants, not because the system was broken to begin with. There is a better way forward than this, and once we unlock it, we'll all be better off. And then she was like, and no, it's not hyperbole. and then it talks about the girls clubs and quotes more from the thing. But I just thought that was, definitely like right up my alley for something to put a pin in. And, certainly if anything is happening like that in your workplace, please send me an email withoutacountrypodcast@gmail.com. And so I just want to do two short things. One is specifically about AOC at the DSA forum. I think this is, really interesting. The DSA always on again, off again with good old AOC. Oh God, I hate the way City and State does this. Why would they? Sorry, they do the City and State, which is the local, a local news source for New York City. I had a link to this AOC story, but they do it so that the link consistently goes to the news story, which is so dumb. Let me search this. Let's see. Okay. So this is from Mike. If you just search in the search bar City and State AOC, it's the first article that comes up. And this says at DSA forum, AOC pledges not to vote for any military aid to Israel, which, Mike is going to love this topic, but also was a lot of, young and super leftist people were really, upset about the AOC's, stance on this. So Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez previously said she supported sending defensive arms to Israel, which had led some DSA members to oppose endorsing her for re-election. And again, they have an on again, off again relationship with good old AOC. And then when I woke up this morning, and the first thing that came across my Instagram was Amanda Seales. It was very complex. She cited a lot of articles in there. I don't know what news sources they were from. You could Google them one by one, but about how AOC was a plant as well. And I was like, I don't even know if I have time for this right now. But if you're interested, some further learning, although some of that might, I think a lot of that is borderline conspiracy theory. But again, just for a different perspective. During a private meeting with members of the New York City Democratic Socialists of America on Tuesday night, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said that she would not vote to send any military aid to Israel, according to a partial recording of the virtual forum shared with City and State. Quote, "I have not once ever voted to authorize funding to Israel, and I will never," Ocasio-Cortez said in response to a question about whether she would support an arms embargo. Quote, "The Israeli government should be able to finance their own weapons if they seek to arm themselves," she added. Quote, I wanted to clarify," an NYC DSA member asked in a follow-up question, "If the moment presents itself in Congress, will you commit to voting no for any spending on arms for Israel, including so-called defensive capabilities?" "Yes," Ocasio-Cortez quickly answered. "Okay, and I want you to know that if and when you do vote no, a ton of us have your back. So thank you," added the DSA member, whose name was not included in the recording. "I appreciate that. Thank you," Ocasio-Cortez said. Ocasio-Cortez's new commitment to vote against funding even defensive weapons to Israel represents a small but significant shift from her previous position. The congressional representative had previously opposed sending offensive weapons to Israel, but had defended the idea of sending defensive weapons, such as the Iron Dome missile defense system, a position that led some NYC DSA members to oppose endorsing her for re-election this cycle. And the 2026 endorsement for re-election itself hardly matters. Ocasio-Cortez faces only token opposition and is the most successful small donor fundraiser in the country. Yeah, I mean, like going up against AOC, I can't even imagine. But it is symbolically important as both DSA and Ocasio-Cortez prepare for the 2028 presidential election. Ocasio-Cortez is widely seen as a standard bearer for the left and future presidential candidate, and any rift between NYC DSA and its most famous member could undermine left unity going into 2028. DSA is a proudly anti-Zionist organization that advocated early and often for a ceasefire in Gaza and is committed to the boycott. Well, and I just want to be clear, when you look at the actual tenets of the DSA, it is not only someone that advocated early for a ceasefire in Gaza. Free Palestine is one of the tenets of it's one of the main things the DSA sets out to do. That's just be very clear on that. Go to the DSA website. Their that, what if I want to call them, like you would call them like their pillars or whatever. One of the pillars of the DSA is literally Free Palestine. Obviously, it's more more wording than that, but that is one of the core parts of the DSA. So it's not just like, oh, this is their stance. This is the stance of the organization always since its start. And it's committed to the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement against Israel. It expects its endorsed candidates to oppose all aid to Israel, a standard that some DSA members claim Ocasio-Cortez has not met. In 2021, she voted present rather than no on a funding package for the Iron Dome. Last year, she voted against an amendment to the Department of Defense Appropriations Act proposed by former Republican Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene that would have stripped out funding for the Iron Dome from the must-pass defense bill, though it would not have touched other military aid to Israel in the bill. That amendment failed with just 6 votes in favor, but 2 other lefty squad members, Representatives Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, were among those who voted with Marjorie Taylor Greene. Ocasio-Cortez then voted against the Defense Appropriations Act itself and released a statement explaining that she opposed sending offensive aid to Israel, but not defensive Iron Dome capacities. Ocasio-Cortez's apparent willingness to send defensive weapons to Israel upset a number of her DSA comrades. I mean, in all fairness, everything upsets them, who circulated except for Zohran Mamdani, who circulated a petition ahead of Tuesday's candidate forum pledging to vote against endorsing her for re-election unless she committed to opposing all military and settlement aid to Israel, including Iron Dome funding. Nearly 300 DSA members signed that petition, though even more signed a competing petition supporting her endorsement. It was evident during the forum that Ocasio-Cortez felt her record on Israel-related legislation had been distorted by some of her critics on the left, which she said was counterproductive. It does not benefit us as a movement because I see when we try to persuade our colleagues, I see the effect that has when people feel like if they vote our way, they are just going to be lied about anyway, she said at one point. I have to be able to make that case to grow our ranks. According to 3 DSA members who attended the forum, Ocasio-Cortez also said she will oppose any attempts to enshrine the controversial International Holocaust Remembrance Association definition of anti-Semitism, which labels certain criticism of Israel as anti-Semitic, into law, but she did not accede to all of NYC DSA's demands, and good for her. She declined to back the socialist group's full slate of candidates and instead said she would consider endorsing individual candidates on a case-by-case basis. Yeah, and that's another thing. Zohran Mamdani's been spending a lot of time doing fundraising videos for Claire Valdez here in New York City. And it's like, all right, work on New York City. Like, and I know that is, I guess, obviously, like, she would be a representative of New York City too. So I guess you could argue it would be doing that. But I'm just like, I don't love that. You know, as someone who has had to make content, I don't think we can, like, you know, turn our nose up at how much time content creation actually takes. So while I really appreciate and agree with him being constantly communicative with the constituents of New York on what he's doing, you could also just like have someone upload like a little listicle onto a website. We don't need a fucking video for everything. And certainly the extensive fundraising videos for Claire Valdez, I just don't think is the priority of New York City. And that's been kind of annoying.
What did you think of the Eric Adams spoof video?
The spoof video with the Sliwa video that the comedy sketch that they did together.
The one where he's like going through the house looking for like different things that New York can save money on, and it's like
I don't even think I don't even think I saw that. I can't. Zohran makes so much content. I can't even fucking watch it all. What do you want to tell me about it?
No, I mean, literally, the Eric Adams video might be my favorite thing of all time. So, like, using that to you know bring up some of the graft in the city was actually, I don't know, it spoke to my millennial sensibilities. I really liked it, but I wanted to get your take on it as like a comic. Like, is this hack or is this funny? kind of.
Oh, I think Zoran's very corny, but I think that works for politics, and I think that the average person is pretty corny. So like, you can't be doing stand-up level comedy as a politician. It's going to be too abrasive, and it's going to be too abrasive for the average person. It's going to be off-putting and scary. So like, yeah, I think a lot of like when he was like, I remember when he did that like "Be My Valentine" thing when it was like registering to vote. I was like, this is I can't even, I don't even want to win if I have to make a video like this. It turned my back. But yeah, like, so like yeah, Claire Valdez, so she's an assembly member, like, but just like, it's been so many videos doing this for her, and I at a certain point I just go, I don't have a lot of criticism of Zoran, but that is in addition to the weird separation of church and state is the constant fundraising for like other DSA members. Like, an endorsement is one thing, but like to constantly be making like fundraising videos, it just feels very establishment to me. And the kind of the appealing thing about him was that he was a little, not very anti-establishment, but a little more anti-establishment, After Ocasio-Cortez spoke at the forum, a number of DSA-backed elected officials and candidates, including Assembly members Claire Valdez and Diana Moreno, New York City Council member Tiffany Caban, congressional candidate Daria Liza Avila Chevalier, and state senator candidate Aber Kawas spoke in favor of endorsing her. And again, like, I get it, but it's like, some of these people have very little pull, and like, I feel like it really makes, speaking of no kings, I feel like makes a lot of these very low level elected officials feel like kings when they go, you know what? Yeah, we're okay to endorse AOC. You mean the biggest thing to happen to politics, in the past fucking 20 years? Are you kidding me right now? Like, if I was AOC, I'd be like, fuck you. Oh God. Okay. The online endorsement vote for NYC DSA members, like, at this point, AOC is like, what do the constituents think? The online endorsement vote for NYC DSA members closes on April 6th. Ocasio-Cortez's commitment to opposing all military funding for Israel should mollify most of her critics on the left, making her a shoo-in for endorsement. Valdez said failing to endorse Ocasio-Cortez for re-election would be a mistake because there are still millions of people who support her and are still looking for a political home. Yes, I agree, Claire. Keeping Ocasio-Cortez in the fold means those people could eventually join the DSA. And you see what they're doing here. They're exactly what I said they were doing. They're trying to get the DSA big enough so that the DSA can run it on its own line and run its own candidate for bigger and bigger offices, while cutting and create something that is separate from the Democratic Party, which again is fine, and we do need a third party, but it's a way to ease us into that third party. And the establishment Democrats really I don't think are taking this nearly serious enough. Like, basically, the only thing that they're doing to combat this is they are staging a media attack against Hassan Piker, which I get it, is I guess that, like, they're finally understanding the power of streamers and podcasters, but still, while cutting formal ties with Ocasio-Cortez would leave them politically homeless. Ocasio-Cortez herself spoke about the importance of working closely with DSA, contrasting her relationship to the socialist organization that has backed her since 2018 with her relationship to other groups. There are a lot of organizations with which I may have a more transactional political relationship. I do not seek a transactional relationship with the DSA, she said. I seek a relationship of mutuality. Mutuality? How do you say that word? I mean, I know what it means, but like mutuality and shared interest. Let's boil that down to what it is. Oh, I saw what the DSA did for Mamdani, and I don't think now's my time as a New York elected official to have the DSA on my bad side. That's what that is. And then let's end it with something light. I didn't even know about this until Mike brought it to my attention. This is from Fox. J.D. Vance says he was obsessed with UFOs, believes aliens are actually demons. Vice President J.D. Vance said he thinks that among the devil's great tricks is to convince people he never existed. While discussing the mystery surrounding UFOs, Vice President J.D. Vance, who is Catholic, said he believes what people think of as aliens are actually demons. While interviewing Vance, conservative commentator Benny Johnson asked the vice president, "You gonna release all the, it's not Epstein files, it's UFO files, guys. That's what they're concentrating on now." We're working on it," Vance said. He explained that when he took office, he was, quote, obsessed with the UFO files, but ended up being busy with other issues, which is, girl, I hear you. You know, that's what I would want to look into too. But oh no, he was busy with other issues like my administration tearing apart the threads of America. Vance asserted that he will get to the bottom of the matter. "I don't think they're aliens. I think they're demons anyway," Vance noted. Prompted by Johnson, Vance later elaborated on his view. "Well, look, I think that celestial beings who fly around, who do weird things to people, I think that the desire to describe everything celestial, to describe it as aliens, I mean, every great world religion, including Christianity, the one that I believe in, has understood that there are weird things out there and that there are things that are very difficult to explain," he said. And I naturally go, when I hear about sort of extranatural phenomenon, that's where I go to is the Christian understanding that, you know, there's a lot of good out there, but there's also some evil out there, he continued. I mean, you being part of the evil, my guy. He added that he believes that among the devil's great tricks is to convince people he never existed. Last month, President Donald Trump said he would order
That's literally a line from Usual Suspects. What are you doing?
Well, you know, you got to get your lines from somewhere. Last month, President Donald Trump said he would order the release of files pertaining to the issue of aliens and UFOs. "Based on the tremendous interest shown, I will be directing the Secretary of War and other relevant departments and agencies to begin the process of identifying and releasing government files related to alien and extraterrestrial life, unidentified aerial phenomenon, which is UAP, and unidentified flying objects, obviously UFOs, and any and all other information connected to these highly complex but extremely interesting and important matters. God bless America," the president declared in a February Truth Social post. And like, didn't JD Vance went to didn't he go to an Ivy League school? Am I making this up? Yeah. Yeah. He went to Yale Law School, which is different than going to Yale for undergrad. Okay, because I was like, I thought he went to Yale, but he went to Yale Law School. Again, not that that's not impressive, but it's not the same as going to Yale for undergrad. Okay. Anyway, it's just really alarming when you hear these people talk without, constraints. Anyway, absolutely action-packed episode this week. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode. Hopefully I will see you this Saturday at the Epstein Egg Hunt. Starts at 11 a.m. in Washington Square Park with Disrupt. Bring your friends, wear comfortable clothing, and we will all stay informed together. And it's a great way to meet other people who care about this kind of stuff. Like, when we talk about community, meeting friends, I mean, truly, even I'm not that this is the reason that you should come out, but like, if you're looking for a boyfriend or a girlfriend, like this is the kind of thing where you're going to meet someone who maybe shares like your passions in life. And then secondly, of course, next Thursday, April 9th at 9:15 p.m., New York Comedy Club, Midtown, East 24th Street, Blair Saki and I host the Nacho Bitches reunion, one night only. It's me, it's Blair, it's Rosebud Baker, it's Ian Fidance, and it's Lisa Traeger. What an OG amazing lineup. All these amazing people who we started comedy back with, over a decade ago, who are now national, international touring comedians. I'm so proud of all of them, and I can't wait to spend a night celebrating the reunion with them. Of course, follow me on all social media at Philanthropy Gal. If you want to support the show, it's patreon.com/withoutacountry. You can help support the show for as little as $6 a month as a cutie, $11 a month as a capitalist pig, and dictator position right now is taken, but all hail to Christopher Fungi. And then lastly, make sure that you're subscribed to the Without a Country YouTube. That's a free way to help support the show and everything we do here. Thanks to Mike and Crystal for and AJ, as always, for helping out with the show. And Mike, do you have anything that you want to promote?
Also April 9th at the Palladium in Times Square, the Armored League. And then the following week, April 18th, our first show in the state of Connecticut, going to be at the Truck Bar in Berlin, CT. So if you're near the Hartford area, come on down. It's like a 500-person trucker bar, and we're going to have some knights fighting there. It's going to be a good time. Tickets at thearmoredleague.com.
And thank you so much to Alfred, who did. Every now and then his crotch licking can be so silent that I miss it, but I did see it happening. So hopefully that's not getting us demonetized on YouTube. But our little guy has fallen asleep now. So thank you so much for joining us. Remember, the truth is in there. Keep looking for Shelly Miscavige, and no one, not even you, is immune from joining a cult. I'll talk to you next week. Bye.
Running from the man, yeah, the madman's coming, yeah, the man's gunning for me tonight. I spent the last week running from the heat, but the beat's coming alive.